If you are having sex with a woman for 5 to 6 minutes, 90% chance she's not orgasming, even if she sounds like she is. I am thrilled today to bring on Dr. Rena Malik. She has a giant following online from being willing to talk about the taboo subjects in a way that is science and data backed. Are we having less sex than ever before?
Absolutely.
Are there any studies that show how often women actually fake an orgasm?
40% of women faked an orgasm. But men also fake orgasms.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Is the G-spot real? Really?
If you exercise 150 minutes a week, moderate intensity cardiovascular exercise, it's as good as taking a Viagra.
Wow. Women who watch porn and read those like kind of romance fantasy novels, it might increase our sex drive. Hi, I'm Codie Sanchez, and this is the Big Deal podcast. I want to talk about a thing we don't talk about enough, which is how to have sex, how to have better sex, how to have sex longer with a partner that you adore. And so this podcast is really, really a special one, I think. And I wouldn't bring just anybody on here to talk to you about this. There's lots of people who talk a lot on the internet about things like sex. When we come to a subject matter like this, I wanted to bring you the best. She has published 80 peer-reviewed publications and been an online content editor for the Journal of Urology. You're going to want to listen to this episode. And I can also promise you, you're probably going to want to send it to a few friends. The reason that I wanted to have you on today was not to talk about health broadly.
Yeah.
But, I talked to our mutual friend and she was like, you have to talk to Dr. Malik about sex. And I was like, excuse me? I'm like in my spreadsheets right now. What are you talking about?
You're like, that's not what my audience comes to me for.
And she was like, there is an underpinning of society that obviously we have to procreate. And you're happier. There's some studies that show that you might be wealthier if you procreate and get married and have kids. And so I think it's important that we talk about sex. At the end of this little session, what I'm hoping people listening to today will get is maybe just having better sex, maybe having more sex, maybe not feeling bad asking the questions that they want to know about good or bad sex. Erectile dysfunction, not. And so at the end, I hope everybody's like, oh, this is amazing. Now I can go have a little bit better sex, a little bit more sex, because who doesn't want that?
Everybody wants that.
Yeah.
Right?
Except bad sex. Nobody wants more bad sex.
Right. And that's the thing. There's a lot of bad sex. There's a lot of bad sex because people are not educated, right? They're like, they see what's on porn or what's in even media, right? Like a guy penetrates a woman, within minutes they're orgasming, she's happy, he's happy. And it's like, oh, it's the best thing ever. It's like, that's not reality. When you look at first-time sex encounters, so let's say a man and a woman, 45% of the time the woman's going to orgasm, only 45%. If you look at a lesbian first encounter, 95% of the time they orgasm.
That's such incredible advertising for lesbians everywhere. 95% of the time.
Because they know the anatomy. Wow. It's so simple. They just know the anatomy.
Of course, it makes all the sense in the world.
Right.
They're
It's
also
not like
handy. They got all these extra pockets. I just feel like being a lesbian that sounds great. I wish, turns out I'm into dudes.
Yeah, me
but
too.
good on you guys.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Yeah. It's not that they're, better. They just are more knowledgeable.
Absolutely.
Like, what are some of the biggest myths that even smart people believe about sex these days?
I think the biggest myth is that the bigger the penis, the better the sex. And yeah, sure. Some women have orgasms from cervical stimulation, but not a lot, right? So 85% of women need clitoral stimulation to climax, which doesn't require a large penis. And so it's like, it's more about, and people joke, oh, it's the motion in the ocean, whatever. Like, yeah, it is partially how you move and how you use your other body, right? Your mouth, your fingers, your whatever, your toys, whatever you bring to the bedroom. Like, those things are just as important. And honestly, it's not even just about penetration. Like, it's about exploring, finding your erogenous zones, like you stimulating other areas and not just being so genital focused. Like, it's not all about the orgasm. It's also about the pleasure you feel while you're being intimate and the connection you have with the person. So I think that is the biggest myth, is like that penetration and size are everything.
That sounds right to me, that like 85% of women need clitoral stimulation.
Absolutely.
Are there any studies that show how often women actually fake an orgasm?
Yes, there are studies. And I think it's like as high as like 40% of women have faked an orgasm. But men also fake orgasms.
Whoa.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. So there's some men who have what's called delayed ejaculation. So they will take like 30 minutes or more to ejaculate. It's like 9%. It's not a small number, but they don't talk, they don't complain about it, right? Because they're all trained to think this is a good thing. And so then they're just like, I need it to be over, so I'm going to fake it.
That almost, I think, would be worse as a man to fake it, right? Because as a woman, you kind of like shake it off.
Yeah.
But as a man, you have like a physical manifestation of the fact that you're not done, don't you?
Yes. I mean, like, I think they do, but they probably just, like, I'm guessing, and I don't think they've gotten into that detail in the research, but they probably like roll over, go to the bathroom, like, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I had a girlfriend who, God, we must have been 30 at the time, and she was married and she had a kid already, maybe 2. And she had told me she had never had an orgasm, 30 years old. And I was sort of blown away. And it took her a while to say that out loud. And then we were in a group, like a small, slightly bigger group of women, and there was another woman. And so then I was like, oh my God, how common is this?
12% of women have never had an orgasm. That's a lot of women, 12%. And so like, why is this? So a lot of times it's just because women aren't taught, right? So there's not enough time for arousal. So arousal for women takes longer than men. It takes about 25 minutes on average. And so if you think about sex, the average duration for sex is about 5 to 6 minutes. So for a man to ejaculate, when they've actually done something where they like took a stopwatch and timed it, like the partner puts on their stopwatch, times penetration to climax, and they've done it around the world, and it's around 5 to 6 minutes. And so if you think about that, if we're focused only on male pleasure and the whole thing is penetration, then within 5 minutes, they will climax and you will barely be aroused, right? Like you haven't even gotten there yet. And so if you're not focusing on mutual pleasure, then many women will not orgasm, right? So that's one. 2 is, so there's not enough time. 2 is like, if it hurts. So like sometimes we just assume you should be well lubricated, everything should work. But sometimes people have reasons they don't lubricate well. Genetics, they're on certain medications, and they still have sex with their partner without lubrication because like, why should I need it? I'm young, I'm healthy. But lubricant is great. It makes things slippery. It makes things more fun. It makes things more pleasurable. So pain is certainly going to prevent you from having an orgasm. Right. And then inadequate stimulation. So if you're not stimulating the clitoris, like I said, 85% of women need clitoral stimulation. And if you're just focusing on penetrative sex and you don't have favorable anatomy that's going to let you climax through vaginal penetration, then you're not going to climax.
So like men listening basically need to realize a couple of things, which is if you are having sex with a woman for 5 to 6 minutes, 90% chance she's not orgasming, even if she sounds like she is.
Yep.
Just like baseline, take that for what it is.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing some sort of foreplay and it's not lasting longer than 25 minutes, you're not fucking Casanova who's killing it magically in 5 to 6 minutes. You're just, the other person just doesn't want to deal with the fact or come clean about it.
Yeah.
Which is like something that I don't think is said enough to dudes.
If a woman has an orgasm and she's like not sure, she didn't have an orgasm.
That's so true. And I think if you have to ask, she didn't have an orgasm either. Like that's really fascinating. And I think kind of freeing because it's not the size of your penis. So it doesn't really matter if it's huge or not. It's a lot about duration and consistency and touching the clitoris. And like, this isn't rocket science, dudes. And so you could like be pretty incredible with your woman with not that much work.
Absolutely. And a lot of it comes from like, just talk to them. Like, baby, does this feel good? Like, do you like this? What turns you on? What do you like? Like, show me, or even watch, if someone is open to masturbating, watch them masturbate. What do they do? Be like, let's masturbate together. I think that's hot. Like, whatever it is, right? And you're going to find out what they like because they're going to do it. They're going to do it well.
Is it true that women start to desire sex less and that our libido goes down as we get older? And if that is true, can we get it back and how?
So low libido is very common. In fact, 40% of women will have low libido in their lifetime. Your sexual desire is based on a variety of different things. So what happens initially, right? Think about when you're younger and you're dating and you're really excited to see your partner. There's like this atmosphere of desire. You're like, oh, I can't wait to go on a date with you. I'm going to shave my legs. I'm going to look really attractive. I'm going to make sure I'm ready.
Yeah, totally.
Ready for sex, right? If it comes, because you may not, right? You're still dating. And so you're like, okay, let's be ready. And then you get this, like, you get excited about it. And then you get to be with your partner. It's really fun and attractive and you have great time and everything's wonderful. But then as you're in a longer term relationship, you're like, they're always there. They're always there. And I'm busy and I'm tired and maybe I'm not in the mood today. Maybe you're not in the mood right now. And so it becomes like you never prioritize sex because you're like, why would I prioritize sex? I've got a job, some kids, like, my parents are aging, all this other stuff is going on. Like that'll happen when it happens. It's supposed to be spontaneous. I'm supposed to see my partner, see them, get turned on and jump them, right? Like that's how it should be. But the reality of the situation is like, how often does that really happen? It becomes what's called responsive desire. So you start like being with your partner and you're like, you start having foreplay, you start touching, cuddling, whatever. Like, oh yeah, I do like that. Oh, I do want sex, but I didn't know it until I actually became a little bit intimate with my partner. I actually started touching them, being with them. Like, oh yeah, I remember. And that's completely normal. And the thing is that people are so fixated on this, like it needs to be spontaneous that they won't even cuddle or be intimate with their partner because like, oh, then they're going to want sex and I don't want sex. And so there's also this like back and forth. The issue becomes when you both don't want to have sex because of low libido, that's okay. I mean, like you guys are fine as a relationship. But when one person wants a lot and one person doesn't, that's where it becomes a problem. It's not a problem with the person who has low libido or the person who has high libido. It's about matching the relationship together, right? So I don't want ever to point fingers at someone who has low libido, but there are medical reasons. So obviously there are like lifestyle reasons like I talked about. And obviously stress is a huge killer of libido, right? If you're stressed about anything, like you don't want to have sex, you're thinking about that thing. You're not in your mindful moment to have sex, which is what you need to be. You need to be fully present, enjoying the pleasure that comes with being with your partner. And most of us are like thinking about what we got to do after this is all over, right? And so like we don't take the time and there's no foreplay, right? So like when you're in a long-term relationship, you're like, oh yeah, I see you all the time. I love you. Okay. But there's no like sexy texts or like, let me just touch you in the morning and tell you how beautiful I think you are. Or like, hey, I can't wait for later. Like there's no planning. Like, hey, this is going to be our time. This is going to be our time for intimacy. And instead of date night where we go out to dinner and just talk, which is still really important, like, and then we're bloated, we don't want to have sex afterwards. It's like, let's actually say, hey, this is going to be time for intimacy. Like we are going to shut everything else out, put our phones away, be together, get naked. And if sex happens, it happens, but let's just like enjoy each other. Let's like put the pressure off like, oh, I have to have sex. Let's just want to appreciate each other. So like, those are things that I think you can work on as a relationship, but there are reasons, like I said, why libido declines. So in women, we know that libido declines. And one of the reasons is because of testosterone. So testosterone in women, we have more testosterone than we do estrogen in our bodies. So we actually, and that is the hormone of desire. And so we talk about, it's actually having a moment right now, testosterone, but we know that it declines, and it doesn't decline like in menopause, like abruptly, but it declines quite significantly. So you'll find that your testosterone starts declining, and that can affect your ability to have desire. And so that's one reason. And then, so we have, off-label ways to improve desire, and we have on-label ways in terms of medication. So we have 2 on-label medications for premenopausal women. Now they work for postmenopausal women, they work for men, but they are just studied for that population. And so there's one, which is a pill you take every night. It's called Addyi. You take it every night before bedtime. It slowly increases your desire. So it's not like you're going to take it and all of a sudden have a desire, but you might like be doing the dishes and a TV show comes on and you're like, oh, that's kind of hot. And you never thought that before, right? And you're like, okay, I feel myself coming back. I'm getting myself back. I feel like myself again. And then another one is Vyleesi, which is an injection you give yourself 45 minutes before sex, before you want, basically. And it gives you a very sudden increase in desire. And both of these work on the brain. So they try to increase the hormones of desire because there's like a balance, like a seesaw. So there's hormones that increase desire and hormones that don't, or signals. And so we're increasing some of the signals that do increase desire. And so those are a couple options. And then off-label also, you can do testosterone replacement for women.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How big is the population of men that struggle with erectile dysfunction?
So 52% of men over 50. Wow. And that goes up every decade. So 60% at 60, 70% at 70, 80% 80.
So it's really common. Does that mean at like 40 or 30, it's 30 and
it's a little bit
40%?
less. It's a little bit less, probably like 25% in your 40s. But
that's 1 out of 4.
It's a lot. And so that's why some guy will be like, oh, I'm 40. This shouldn't be happening to me. And the thing about erectile dysfunction is it's like an opportunity to find out what's going on with the patient. And a lot of times they come in and the doctor's like, here's some Viagra, bye. But it's like a real opportunity because of the guys who have ED, 14% of those guys will go on to have a heart attack in 7 years. And because it's an early manifestation of problems with blood flow, and problems with blood flow often lead to heart problems. And so it's like 2 to 3 years before you're going to see a heart issue, you're going to see erectile dysfunction.
So what do you do to fix it?
So it's the same things. Anything that's good for your heart is good for your genitals, right? So if it's for blood flow, and that's 70% of the reason that people have ED is from blood flow. I mean, there's obviously psychogenic issues, like it's in your head, but I think every guy who has issues with erectile dysfunction has that, right? They're like stressed about it. But 70% of guys with ED, it's because of a blood flow issue. And so what you need to do is improve blood flow. So how do you do that? You do that with diet, with exercise, improving your cholesterol, improving your blood pressure, and moving your body, exercise, like cardiovascular exercise, 150 minutes a week, those sorts of things. So the things that are like not sexy, like nobody wants to do them, but they're so important.
So you could literally, instead of taking Viagra, the research shows that you could solve ED in 70% of cases by working out more and eating healthy.
So there's actually a study that shows that if you exercise 150 minutes a week, moderate intensity cardiovascular exercise, it's as good as taking a Viagra.
That's wild, because that's what, 25 minutes a day?
Yeah, 30 minutes a day. 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So then why is Viagra given so much instead of that?
I think because our healthcare system is broken, right? You have 15 minutes to talk to a patient. So you have to get the information, do the exam, and then talk to the patient. So you're like, here's something that can help you. And because a lot of patients, that's what they want. They want a pill that's going to fix their problem.
Yeah. And I think Dr. Tina, when I had her on the pod, which was a great episode too, we didn't talk about sex, but she was talking about how, it is every doctor has like their version of the hammer, which is like, if you're a surgeon, then that's going to be your hammer. And, if you're a psychiatrist, then it's going to be pills. And so it's like whatever is your biggest and hardest weapon is the one that you
and the one that works the most, right? Yeah. Because like exercise works, but it takes a long time and you have to be consistent, and most people lose consistency. And we know that, right? For any behavior change, it's very difficult to maintain. Yeah. And so the thing that's going to be most effective is going to be a medication for most people.
Yeah, that's wild. But I had never thought about, so do you see very many men struggle with erectile dysfunction that are super fit?
Yes, I do actually.
So then what's going on there?
Usually they have high cholesterol or they have high blood pressure. So they may have family history that causes them to have high blood pressure, or their diet is affecting their cholesterol. And when you get deposits or atherosclerosis from high cholesterol, that affects blood flow. And so they may not know it. They're like really fit. They're like the specimens of men, and their cholesterol's high because of their diet or their genetics. And they then have issues with erectile dysfunction.
Because you said something fascinating to me, which is that women who watch porn and read those like kind of romance fantasy novels actually might increase our sex drive.
Yeah, I think it depends. So it depends on how good your sex is in general. So if you are dissatisfied with your partner and you're using these movies or books to escape and like get pleasure for yourself, then it's not going to lead to more intimacy because you're already having bad sex with your partner, right? But whereas like you're in a good, healthy relationship, you enjoy your partner, and you're just using these as tools, right? To like enhance your pleasure so that when you're with your partner, you're like really easily getting into the mindset of being able to be pleasured and to be focused and mindful and enjoy. Whereas I think sometimes that's the hardest part for women, is that you can't get out of your own head, right? And we say that, but there's data to it. So like when you look at studies of Lori Brotto is a researcher who did the study, they did 20 minutes of mindfulness for women who were having low libido, 20 minutes of mindfulness outside the bedroom every single day. And they saw that after, I think it was 6 or 8 weeks, they had significant improvements in all the domains of female sexual function, desire, arousal, libido, everything. And orgasm, everything. And a lot of those women, when they followed up with them a year later, many of them were still doing mindfulness because they had, and without being prompted, they were still doing it because they had so much benefit from it. Because being mindful outside of the bedroom helped them be more mindful in the bedroom.
What does a mindfulness practice for sex look like?
It's just, sort of, I mean, there's different ways to do it, but generally think about like clearing your head and trying to focus on, your breath and your body, and, thoughts will come in, but sort of like saying, okay, let that one go, come back and focus. And sort of just training your brain to be able to focus on your body, what it feels like in space, your breath, those sorts of things.
Oh, so it's not like visualizing sex. It's literally just straight up mindfulness.
Just straight up mindfulness. Yeah.
So almost meditating could help you have a better sex life?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fascinating. I had no idea.
Yeah.
But I guess it does make sense though for women, because we're always thinking about something else.
Yeah. I mean, you could think about it, right? Even like doing a podcast, like we have long conversations with people, so we're better at listening for long periods of time because we've trained ourselves to do that. Whereas someone else may not be able to listen to somebody for 2 hours, right?
And we talked a little bit about porn for women, but let's talk about porn for men. I've heard lots of negative things about porn is porn bad to watch?
Yeah. So I think that there are, I think there's a few, like it's a very complex and nuanced discussion. So I think porn has been around for a long, long time, right? It's not new. Porn has been around for a long time, but it's never been as accessible as it is today. It's in our pockets. It's everywhere you go. You can literally pull up a porn video for free anytime. And so that's a problem because people will use it as an escape from like distressing emotions. So it's like, why are you using porn? There's actually studies that look at like, why do people use it? So people use it for pleasure. People use it for learning new skills. People use it to like escape. People use it to avoid negative feelings. And that's where it becomes a problem, right? You use it for negative feelings. And then and if you have some, moral incongruence, like you feel shame because of using it, because of the way you were raised or because of what society tells you. And then you feel more bad feelings and then you use it again. And then you have more bad feelings and it becomes this vicious cycle. And so that's where it becomes a problem. But there's many, many people. I mean, like I think realistically, 90+% of the population has watched pornography at some point in their lifetime. And most people just use it as a tool to have pleasure, to enjoy, to entertain, right? Yeah. And in those cases, people tend to do fine. It's when it becomes this like moral incongruence and this shameful spiral where people start really having a problem with it. And then it starts being like, oh, I'd rather watch porn than hang out with people because that gives me distress. Or I'd rather watch porn than hang out with you or get rejected from my partner because I don't have to work at that, right? And so they start using it as not as a tool for pleasure or enjoyment, but as a tool for escaping life.
So are there studies that show the more porn you watch, the less sex you have?
Not necessarily. So it's not necessarily always correlated with the amount. So if you have, let's say, a moral incongruence, even if you watch porn once a year, you might be very distressed by it, right? Whereas somebody could watch porn every day and like just use it as a tool and they watch it with their partner. And actually couples who watch it together tend to have more sex. And couples who have the same sort of consumption patterns. So say your partner watches it 3 times a week and you watch it separately 3 times a week, they show that those couples tend to have more sex because they both have similar like thoughts and ideas about, I mean, I'm extrapolating, but like probably because they have similar ideas or they're more aroused together, whatever the case is. And whereas when there's this like dichotomy where someone's using it a lot and someone's not, that's usually where we see more problems.
If you're married and your partner is using porn instead of having sex with you, which seems to be like, this is something people are talking about. Like, we're not having as much sex as I want, but my husband's watching porn or vice versa. What do you do in that instance? And is that bad or good?
Yeah. So this is a relationship issue, right? So if they're watching porn and they are like rejecting you for sex, that's a problem, right? That's a sign that it's a red flag, right? That's a problem. Whereas if they're watching porn and they initiate with you and you like don't want to all the time, they're also humans, right? So they're like, you keep rejecting me and I still want to have pleasure. So I'm going to go somewhere else and get that pleasure without cheating on you, right? Like I might like use a movie. And so I think there's this balance, but I think really it's a relationship issue. It's like, why is this happening? It's not like it's porn becomes a scapegoat, but why is this happening? Like why, like, is there truly just a problem that you have individually with the porn or is there a relationship issue that we need to uncover?
So I want to break down 2 things. So one is, let's say that you're not having the amount of sex you want to have right now in a relationship. What are a couple of things you could do today to change that? You've given some pill examples, but what else, like practice-wise, would you say this could work?
So first and foremost, talk to your partner. Like stop thinking about yourself, like actually sit down and be like, hey, I want to talk to you about sex. It doesn't have to be in that moment. Give them a heads up because look, no one knows how to talk about sex. It's very uncomfortable, right? I talk about it all the time, but like I know when I talk to people and I can feel them getting uncomfortable, right? And so I think it's like, you have to give people heads up and realize like their response might be like, oh, hell no. Like, does this mean something's bad? Is something wrong with me? Am I not pleasing you or whatever? Right. And so I think first give them a heads up, then like, be like, hey, I just want to talk about our sex life. Like, I think we are great and I just want to make it better potentially and start with the good, right? Like, and ideally I tell people like, don't do it looking them face to face, maybe go on a walk, maybe in the car. So like, it's the first time you're having a conversation and just start by finding like, what turns you on? And that's a great way to, even with a new partner, what turns you on? Like, what do you like? And this is what I like. And like, oh, that's great. And like, do you like this? Like, and it could be nonverbal when you're with them. And if it's a new partner, right? Like, like, you hear them responding in a certain way, that means they like it. And that's why I don't like faking, right? Like, don't fake. Like, when you like something, you will automatically make the noises they want to hear, right? Like, you don't need to fake it. But so, yeah, I would say that's first and foremost is start the conversation. It is not going to be one conversation. It's going to be an evolving, long time. Every so often, you're going to have to sit down and talk about it, like what works, what doesn't.
Yep.
And I think the other thing is like adding novelty, right? So we think about like, it's good to have a routine, a comfort, like, oh, this always works. We both like enjoy it. We both climax, whatever it is. But like it gets, if you're eating dinner, you don't want to eat chicken every day. Right. So some days you want to have a steak or you want to have tofu or like whatever. Right. And so it's like you want to change it up. And the same thing goes for sex. So it doesn't even have to be that crazy. Like it might be doing it on a different side of the bed or like in the kitchen instead of the bedroom. Or you could buy stuff, like you could buy things to just play with and have fun. Again, sex is supposed to be play. It shouldn't be that serious. So like just be open and be playful and enjoy. And I think you will find that just incorporating these small things can make a huge difference.
Is it ever possible in relationships for it to just stay spontaneous forever? Or is that just something we are telling ourselves that is another way for us to beat ourselves up, that we read these romance novels, which are like women's form of porn, I think, these days. Yeah. And it's like all of a sudden the Hulk's picking up the woman every 7 seconds. They're having sex everywhere. The sex is glorious. She has to do nothing. It's totally blissful. And then we should have that for the 50 years that we're married. Like, is that reasonable? Or is it totally unreasonable to think that you won't have to plan sex as you get older?
I would say that it's likely unreasonable to think that, right? I mean, I can't say there's not people. I mean, there's certainly people who are more sexual. And like, say you are reading those books, like that means you're probably going to be more into your partner. So there's data that like women who watch pornography, and this is not like everybody, but like women who enjoy those sorts of things are more sexually adventurous, more, they like to have sex with their partner, and they actually have more sex if you look at the amount of time they have sex with their partner. So, so there is like, if you are potentially consuming things together as a couple, that's naturally the kind of person you are, then yes, absolutely. If your partner's also that way, it's possible. But I would say most times you have to work at it because life is ever evolving, right? Like your priorities are not the same at all times in your life. Imagine yourself 10 years ago, very different than where you're sitting right now. And it'll be very different 10 years from now. And so, it takes work. And I think the thing is people are so afraid to work at sex. Like, why should I have to work at sex?
Right.
Right. It's a natural thing. But guess what? You had to learn everything. You had to learn how to walk. Like you have to learn how to get good at sex. And it doesn't just happen. You're not just going to be good at it because you're good looking or because you have a large organ or because like whatever. It's not going to just make you good at sex. Right. And so you have to learn, you have to practice, and you have to learn with your partner if you're in a relationship, right? Like what do they like? Everyone's not exactly the same. And so, yes, there's things that work for many, many people, but it's about finding out what they like and really like identifying that and playing. Sex is supposed to be playful.
Is the G-spot real?
Yeah, the G-spot is a zone, actually. It's not a spot. And I think people are like, where is it? What is it? Like, is it a button? Do I have to find it? Like, no, it's just an area, right? So it's like the top of the vagina, and it's about 2 to 3 centimeters in. That's where it's very densely innervated. There's an area called the Skene's glands, which also have innervation there. And so that can be very pleasurable. But what I tell people is like, oh, if I stimulate that area, they're going to orgasm. But a G-spot in a female is the same as the prostate in the male. And so while some guys like prostate play, not everyone does. And not everyone orgasms from prostate play. And so the same thing goes for women. And I think the other thing is like there's variations in anatomy. So in the G zone, there's also like the clitoral bodies, which people also don't realize. It's not just the glands, the little head that you see on the outside. It actually goes deep into the pelvis. And it curves downward just like the male penis does. And so there's a shaft basically, but it's internal. Mm-hmm. And so when you're stimulating the G zone, you're also stimulating the clitoral shaft. Mm-hmm. And so for some people where there's maybe some, the width of that area or like the volume in that area is different, you might get more clitoral stimulation through vaginal penetration. And so those people may orgasm more easily through vaginal penetration, whereas others will not. It's just an anatomic difference. Like it's not a big deal, but there's other ways to stimulate a partner and really get them to climax. And what does it matter if it's not your penis doing it? It's you doing it. That's what matters.
Where did we get this belief that women come every single time from penetration?
Well,
Like, why is that so pervasive?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say where it started, but I can tell you that like it's like think about every movie you watch where there's a sex scene. It is literally there's like I can't remember the first time I saw like clitoral stimulation in a mainstream TV show or movie was like Sex Life, that show on Netflix,
Yeah,
right?
you're right.
I don't think I saw it ever before that. Like on Sex and City, I don't remember anyone like except for talking about vibrators. I don't remember them ever doing anything besides penetrative sex.
You're so right.
Right?
Yeah.
So it was always depicted as penetrative sex. And that's what gets people off. And so I can imagine that, like, okay, then women are like, hey, I'm having penetrative sex. I'm not orgasming. Maybe I need a bigger penis. Like, maybe that's the answer. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? They don't know because no one taught them.
Yeah.
And so they're like, maybe bigger will be better. Maybe girthier will be better. Well, girthier might be a little better because you're having more pressure on the shaft of the clitoris. But like, yeah. So what exactly is, so I think it's one, there's no education. Two, it was never shown to us. And three, there's always been this obsession with like penile size. Like my kids are like 9 and 11. Well, my 11-year-old will talk about his penile size. I mean, we talk about everything at home because I'm his mom, but like, like I'm like, dude, like you haven't gone through puberty, like chill, Hopefully he never listens to this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Well, or finds your YouTube channel. So like, let's talk about that because I think there's also a lot of commentary about what's normal in penis size.
Mm-hmm.
What is actually normal?
It's about 5.3 to 5.7 inches erect. So not huge, not like what we think is average, right? Everyone's like, 12, I want a 12, like 12. Do you know how big 12 inches is?
Opt out, unsubscribe. No, thank you. Absolutely not.
Like, no, that's not. And so when you look at the average people are going to range between like 5 to 5.7 inches fully erect. And so, that is average. And then when you look at the bell curve, like most people fall into that category. And when you start going to like 7.5 to 8 inches, that's like the top 5%. And like, they're probably all like, porn stars. But no, not exactly. But, a lot of them are. And so, I think it's just like what we see, right? People see like people who are in erotic films and you have very large organs and they're using like camera tricks and all this stuff to make it look bigger. And so they're like, oh, that's gotta be what's normal.
So many brands are obsessed with new customers, but the best brands, they know retention is where the margin lives. And OmniSend is retention in a box. You get abandoned cart flows, thank you sequences, review requests, re-engagement messages, all automated. Email and SMS are triggered by actual customer behavior. So if someone buys, hit them with an upsell. Someone ghosts, win them back before they're gone for good. You don't even have to write the sequences. They've got the templates that just work. The ROI is real, and it keeps getting better the longer it runs. Acquisition gets the glory, but retention builds the empire. OmniSend makes sure your business stops leaking customers and starts compounding them.
Is it true, and are there studies that show that young men watching increasingly more porn have problems later on in life? And what are those problems? Is that happening to our younger generation? What's going on there?
Yeah, so it's hard to study, but I definitely think there is. So what's happening is that this is how young men are learning about sex. They don't learn anything in school. There's only 22 states in the United States that are required to have accurate sexual education in school.
Interesting.
So you might have sexual education. It might be accurate. It might not. And usually it's just how to put on a condom, how to get consent, and that's pretty much most of it, right? You're not going to have a lot of like, this is what happens when you get aroused. This is what happens when you have sex. This is what happens to the female body when it gets aroused. Like there's no discussion about that, right? And so people don't know. And their parents are also just like talking about like being safe sex. It's usually very instructional, right? Like, or not instructional, it's usually very like abstinence or safety based. Right. Now they're like, I need instructions. So then I go to porn, right? Because I don't have anywhere else to learn this. I can't ask my parents. How could I ask them, right? And that would be so weird. And so like, we don't talk, and parents are like, well, they should be learning it at school. And so I always say like, you as a parent have to talk to your kid about sex. You have to, it is your job. Like you just have to teach them because that is your job. You are the adult, get over it. Like talk to them about sex and talk to them about porn because what happens is they're going to come across it. You can put all the blockers you want. The average age of a young person seeing porn is 10.
Woo!
10.
Wow.
So before 10, you should talk to your kid about porn because what if they come across something on their friend's phone or wherever and they're like, what is this?
And they're stimulated and then they're confused.
They're stimulated, they're confused. And then, so they watch it maybe even a few times, who knows what, right? And then they have sex the first time and they're like, oh, this didn't go like the movie did, right? She didn't respond the way, or he didn't respond the way that happened. So something wrong with me? Am I broken? Now I'm stressed. And the next time I try to have sex, that stress is either making it difficult for me as a man to get an erection or as a woman to get aroused, because I'm like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? I'm thinking like, I'm so stressed about it that I can't function. And now I'm like, I am broken. I'm truly broken. Something is wrong with me. And oh, but I can't go to a doctor because, or when I do go to the doctor, I get dismissed because unfortunately there's just, oh, it's all in your head. Right. And so because, you see a young person, everything should be fine with you. Your blood flow, everything should be fine. So it's got to be psychogenic. And so they get dismissed. No one has the conversation like why it might be in your head. And then you're like, okay, now I'm just broken. And porn ruined me or whatever ruined me. And yeah, part of it is like, should 10-year-olds be watching porn? No, like I think equivocally everyone can agree that should not be the case, that you should not be watching porn until you are an adult and you can separate fantasy from reality.
Yeah, but what would that even look like? Like, do you think parents should teach their kids like not just about sex? It's so fascinating. I've only ever gotten the safety talk. I got the, here's what happens. Boy meets girl. Don't get pregnant.
Use a condom. Yep.
Use a condom. This is what it looks like if you have a baby. Oh my God, that's so scary.
Yeah.
But I never got here's what good sex feels like, or like, what would that even look like?
Yeah, so
what do you do with your kids?
Yeah. So I don't start with like, let's talk about like, first we teach obviously like, what are your body parts and how does sex work and what happens during sex and why is like, so like you start with, so I have boys, I can tell you for boys what I do. So, okay, they get an erection and they're like, mommy, why is it getting bigger? And most parents are like, oh my God, it's just it's nothing, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes you do panic. Like I remember the first time my son asked me about sex and I said, okay, give me a minute. Let me think about how I'm going to answer you. I'll tell you later. Right. Because I was like, I hadn't thought it through yet. And so even me who teaches about sex was like, I hadn't thought about how to talk to my son about it. So I said, okay, let me think about it. And so then I came back to him and I said, okay, well, so we'd already talked about erections because they get them. They get spontaneous erections all the time, young boys. And so I'm like, okay, this is normal. This is what happens. It's because there's more blood flow there. And it's a totally normal thing. And so they're like, oh, okay, it's normal. I'm like, yeah, sometimes it feels tingly or it feels different or it feels, that's normal. Completely normal. Nothing bad is happening to you. Yeah. I reassure them, right? And then, when they ask, what is sex? And I'm like, okay, well, that's what happens. And I obviously preface it with like, you only do it with someone that you're, whatever your personal values are, you bring that into the conversation. And then, you be safe about it. But I was like, I tell them the basics, like, you know how you get an erection. Well, when your partner is aroused and they also get lubricated and then you insert the penis in the vagina, right? And like, so they're like, okay. And I'm like, look, I know this is a lot, like ask me questions. Yeah. And so I let them, because sometimes you can't think like a kid. You can't like think what they're thinking. So then you say, well, what do you want to know about it? Like, even if you don't want to just go into the whole like semantics, like what are you curious about? Like, what do you want to know? And so just answer the best you can. And even if you're a little awkward or you're uncomfortable, like they don't really know that. They just know that you're talking to them and you're their parent, right? I mean, think about when you were a kid, like your parents, you thought they were amazing. You were like, they just do everything. Like you never thought that they were insecure or like awkward. You were just like, oh, they're just perfect. Like they're my parents. And I mean, most people have a good relationship, but like, so I think, it's just like ask and then leave the door open. So like talking about porn is really awkward. But what I would say is like, hey, you might come across some videos where you see people having sex. So we already talked about sex, right? And they might be confusing to you. So if you do, just come talk to me. Yeah. Like I want you to be able to comfortable and you build that relationship with them where they can talk to you about it.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, God, what a difference it would be in even like our generation if we had also learned what it was not supposed to feel like is the right word, but like I can only imagine if my mom had been like, this is the clitoris. Like I don't think I knew what that that was until I was like 25.
Yeah. I mean, med students don't know what it is, right? Like I have medical students put in catheters for women. I'm a urologist. And so we would teach them how to put it in. And so many would like go towards the clitoris. I'm like, nope, down. The urethra is lower. Right. That's the clitoris. And so, and even in our training, there's very little discussion about the clitoris. We're now starting to have this discussion like, hey, the clitoris has foreskin. Hey, it can get smegma. There's other issues. You have to look at the clitoris and you have to examine the clitoris because what if there's a problem there? What if there's a pathology there? And so it's like even people who are doing these genital exams, like your gynecologist and your urologist, are not getting really trained on it.
Right. And where do you go if people want to get better at sex? So say they actually want to learn how to have sex better and they want to know themselves better too. Like, what do you tell them?
Well, I tell people you have to explore, right?
Yeah.
So like, I would say getting better with sex is one with yourself and one with the partner. So explore by yourself, understand like what happens when you touch certain areas or what areas do you like to have touched. And like, sometimes that's very uncomfortable for people. Like you have to sort of meet people where they are. So if they're not comfortable with that, then there's other ways. But like, I would say that's one.
Do you give them a book? Do you say like, I like these books or no?
Not necessarily. I think that innately people like kids, like, kids will like touch themselves. Like they know, inherently what feels
What you
good,
like.
right?
Yeah.
And they're not doing it because they like want to feel pleasure. They're doing it because they think it soothes them, right? They don't know. They're like, it soothes me, right? And so people generally know. And so it's like, giving them permission. Like it's okay to explore your own body. It's your body, right? You're allowed to understand what you like and don't like. Like, I think it's very different from boys and girls. Like boys, they figure it out very easily.
They really do.
And they're going at it, right? And no one ever even questions it. Like, oh, he's probably just jerking off in his room, right? Like it's like it's like okay. And that's fine. No one ever says like, oh, you shouldn't. I mean, maybe they do say you shouldn't do that, but like people just do it, right? And then they're like, oh, just don't do it in front of people. Exactly. Right? Don't do that in the living room. Like, but it's like, it is something though that we do cloud and shame. So you'll be like, oh my God, don't do that. Like that's another way. Like don't react to your kids. Just be like, hey, this is, it's fine to do this, but like you should do this in privacy. Like, this is something we do privately.
Right.
Because that also internalizes the shame around sex very early on. Now, for women, it's like, it's not as obvious and it's not as intuitive. And there's a lot more like, be a good girl, don't do this, don't like, and so there's a lot less like openness. So it's also like starting at a young age, like, hey, like this is your body, this is your anatomy, this is, what sex is, this is what pleasure is, like teaching our girls that. And then I think, again, meeting people where they are, talk to your partner, explore. So one thing that we do often when people are really in their heads about sex is like the sex therapist will prescribe something called sensate focus. So what that is we say, you're not allowed to penetrate. You're not even allowed to touch the genitals. You, when you're with your partner, want to explore other areas, find your erogenous zones, touch everywhere, but don't touch the genitals. And start really just like, there's no stress about that, right? You don't have to perform. Nothing has to happen. Like, but just touch each other and feel sensual and enjoy each other and figure out what feels good. And once you're like in your head and you're like, oh, wow, this is great, I'm enjoying it. Then you start touching genitals. And they're like, okay, now I'm not stressed about that either. Then we start talking about penetrative sex. And so sort of a way to just work together. And if you're like, I don't know what I like, it's hard to admit that. It's hard to admit that. And so to be like, to say to your partner, like, I don't really know. And like, I'd love for us to figure it out together.
And a lot of this stuff about sex seems like it's really about your health overall, like entire bodily health, not just genital health. And then simultaneously relationship or mental.
Yeah.
It's like we keep treating this one area, but it's actually just a symptom of the human.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you like, it's such a good biomarker of health. Your ability to have sex, so to have desire, to get aroused, to climax, and to feel good at the end of it all those things should be intact, right? And when there's a problem with one of them, it tells us, hey, is there a blood flow problem? Is there a hormonal problem? Is there a mental problem? Is there a neurologic problem? Is there something that you're taking that's affecting your sexual function? And so we got to investigate all those things. And I can't tell you, like, this is one of the greatest ways to find out if something is wrong with you metabolically in your body, right? Because it's a sign that something is awry and we need to investigate. And oftentimes it's a metabolic cause for men and women, right? Like there's probably, like I can tell you that women with diabetes have less arousal and often have more issues with libido.
Yeah. So overall, do you think the data seems to say, are we having less sex than ever before?
Absolutely.
So across the country, what's sort of happening?
I mean, there's so many things that I could speculate on. One is I think that like we have phones, right? So like in the bed before going to sleep or like when you're bored, you look at your phone. But before sometimes you'd be bored and you're like, hey, my partner's next to me. Like I'll just have sex with them. Like why not? Right? Or they'd initiate and you wouldn't be like, hey, leave me alone. I got to look at my Sudoku or whatever you're doing. Right. And now like you have something else that's constantly taking your attention away. So I think that's one. Two is that the stressors are so much higher, right? Like I think the world has changed. The economic landscape has changed. Like it's more difficult to financially like own a home. There's so many different things, right? So I think that there's more stressors in life.
Yeah.
And I think that and there's more expectations from people. Like we're much more individualized. And so like when, like in India, for example, it's much more community feel. So like everyone raises the kids, everyone takes care of the kids, everyone helps each other. And so you have like more people to help you. Whereas now we just like are an island to ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because we talk a lot about things that could progress society, forward. And at the end of the day, it sort of feels like there's been this kind of continuous attack on the nuclear family. Not saying that in some conspiratorial way, just like so many things that have been created have sort of torn apart this nuclear family. And so I think it's so important to talk about sex because that's where life comes from,
Yeah.
and for whatever reason, what did our parents always say? Don't talk about religion, sex, and politics and money, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, for the life of me, I can't understand why you wouldn't talk about money. I can't understand why you wouldn't talk about faith in a positive way. I can't understand why you wouldn't talk about sex in a non-shameful, inappropriate way. And so it does feel like there's kind of like this resurgence of people willing to talk about it. So I'm really glad that you do.
Thank
because
you.
I mean, it's hard to do it in a way that is both entertaining and also super informative.
Yeah. And, I think it's just so important. Like it's how we progress in society, right? That's why there's so much urge for sex. That's why people want to have a lot of sex. That's why sex sells, because we are hardwired to look for sex. We are hardwired to procreate. And so it is so important. And if we literally stop having sex because of all these external factors, then like what's going to happen to society? Like who's going to take care of our aging population? Like what's going to happen? It's a problem.
Let's say that, there's quite a few people here that want to extend their sex span, which I didn't even know that that's a word.
Yeah.
Like how long do humans normally want to still have sex? Like until what age? And how do we increase the amount and duration of our age to want to have sex?
So it's interesting. I actually did a study when I was a resident. I don't think I ever published it, but I did a study because I was like, I asked this exact question. I was like, what about older people? Like how old are they when and turns out that 80, 90-year-olds still want to have sex. And honestly, what happens is that if you continue to cultivate desire, like you still like took care of yourself and you continue to have sex throughout your life and you will still continue to want it, right? Because there's a natural urge to want pleasure and to enjoy people and to have intimacy and connection. But what really happens is sometimes people start getting sexual dysfunction and so they avoid sex. And then as you stop having sex or you start avoiding it, your desire decreases too. And so that whole thing about use it or lose it is sort of true in the sense that like if you don't continue to have sex, your desire will automatically get lower. The other thing is if you're not getting good blood flow to the genitals, they will start to develop changes in the tissues, which will lead to maybe scarring or what we call fibrosis, which will then make it even more difficult to get blood flow down there because the tissues are no longer healthy. And so that's the other thing that happens. So that's why I think sex span is much shorter than lifespan, because you can live without blood flow to your genitals, but you can't necessarily get an erection or get clitoral tumescence and feel arousal because you're not getting good blood flow down there. And then because you're not using it and your desire is going down, you're just not having sex, right? And so I think that the reason to improve sex span is one, like we know that people who have more sex live longer. There's actually data to support that when you're having sex once a week, that those people live longer and have less depression than people that don't. Now, I don't think you should like have to strive for once a week if that's not in but like meaning you're continuing to have regular sex with your partner. And I think that's the take home because one, you're getting good. We know that things are functioning well. It's a biomarker of health. You're getting good blood flow, your hormones are working. All those things are in good order. You're intimate with another person. You're connecting with another person, which is so vital for feeling human connection. And so I think all those things you're usually happier, and happiness has a good positive predictive value. And so all those things together are going to expand your lifespan.
Let's talk about pelvic floor. So you brought this up before. I had no idea. I don't even think I knew this was a thing until I was like 35. And one of my girlfriends actually the other week told me something that I thought was crazy. You probably understand, but she's like, she had some pelvic floor issues. And so she went and she got a pelvic floor massage, which is like I don't think she called it a massage. I'm going to call it a massage. But like
I'm sure I know what she called it.
Yeah. They go in and they actually, what is this pelvic floor?
So-
How do we fix it? Why are people massaging the insides of my friends' vaginas? What's going on here?
Yeah. So okay. Pelvic floor is a bowl of muscles, right? It sits in our pelvis. Men and women have a pelvic floor. I think people forget this. Like men also have a pelvic floor. And this pelvic floor is like something that's like a part of our core musculature. So people think abs, right? But it's abs, back muscles, pelvic floor. It's activated all the time. We're using it with every step. It's helping us remain stable. It's helping hold up our organs. It's helping us when we pee and poop. It's helping women when they're pregnant. Like it's part of our sex lives. It contracts, like I said, 0.8 seconds. It's part of, that whole sexual response. And so it's a very important structure, right? Many structures, a bunch of muscles all together. And so these muscles usually work fine and we don't think about it. They're just doing what they need to do, but they can become dysfunctional. So there's a couple different ways they can become dysfunctional. They can become dysfunctional when they're weak. So that's where people like do Kegels to strengthen the muscles. And that's when women are maybe leaking with coughing, sneezing, jumping on the trampoline. Maybe they're having some prolapse, like things are falling down. With men, we don't see it as often, but they might notice that they're in very extreme circumstances, they have rectal prolapse, like their rectum will prolapse out. But sometimes they'll just
means it like
protrudes
extends.
Out their bottom when they have a poop.
And that does not sound fun.
No, it's very rare. And then, but more often it'll be like, oh, maybe their ejaculate is not going as far as it used to, right? It's just not as forceful as it used to be. And so, but usually you can't tell with men when it's weak. So that's very common. And that's what we think about a lot when we think about the pelvic floor, because we're like, do your Kegels, right? To strengthen your pelvic floor.
Which is just squeezing your vagina?
Essentially an exercise where you're pulling the pelvic floor muscles, you're contracting them, you're squeezing them up and in, right? Yeah. And so we describe it, there's many different ways to describe it, but like it's like as if you're peeing and you stop the stream of urine. You don't want to do it when you're urinating, but that's how you can figure out the moves. For women, we'll say like squeezing up and in the vagina, like you're trying to pluck a blueberry up with your vagina. And then for men, I tell them like, it's like you're like holding in a fart. For both genders, you're holding in a fart.
Jesus.
And then for men, I'll tell them it's like you're lifting up your penis off the ground without touching it.
Yeah.
And I just say, but you don't want to be clenched. It's hard because it's natural to clench your abdomen and your bottom, but you don't want to clench those. You just want to focus on those pelvic floor muscles. And so it's basically a contraction, squeeze and relax, just like you would do a bicep contraction, right? And so that's a Kegel. And it's great for strengthening the pelvic floor, but it's not the only thing you need to do. And it's good when you have a weak pelvic floor. But when you have a tight pelvic floor, which is what I think your friend had, it actually can hurt you to do Kegels because you're strengthening an already tight and tense muscle. And you want to relax that muscle first. And so when people have a tight pelvic floor, and this is pretty common, I think underdiagnosed, is when people have a lot of tension in that pelvic floor and it's tight and contracted. And why does that happen? Because of trauma, because of stress, because of anxiety, because of other conditions sometimes can cause, like if you had surgery or other things can like tense up those muscles. And just like people get TMJ and they tense their jaw at night and they wake up with headaches and they don't even know they're doing it. It's the same thing. It's not like you're controlling your pelvic floor. It's just your body's response to that, whatever the cause is. And so I don't want anyone to feel shame if they have high tone pelvic floor. It just happens. It's nothing you can control. And so then when it happens, people usually don't do anything. They might notice, oh, I'm going to the bathroom a little more often. I'm maybe having some constipation. Maybe I'm having back pain. Maybe I'm having pain with sex. Maybe I'm having pain with orgasm. And with men, I might be having a little bit less strong erections. Maybe I'm having pain in the testicles for men. And so you're like, okay, what's going on? Something is off. And it could present in any of those ways. So I describe it as like if you had your bicep curl and your bicep was stuck like this, obviously your bicep might hurt, but your shoulder might hurt. Your elbow might hurt. Your wrist might hurt. So you're going to see dysfunction in areas that are connected to the pelvic floor. And so in those cases, we need to learn how to relax those muscles. And so there's different exercises you can do to relax, like yoga poses, like child's pose, happy baby, figure 4, low deep squats, diaphragmatic breathing. All those things can help. But sometimes people will actually like massage the muscles, just like you would massage a muscle that's tense. The same thing is they massage those muscles to help relax the muscles. And so pelvic floor physical therapy, when you go to physical therapists, can include that if you feel comfortable in sort of helping you learn how to relax those muscles.
I just immediately started giving her shit, which said my maturity level with this. I was like, you did what? Where? What happened? But she said it really helped her.
Yeah.
And she didn't realize basically how much stress and everything she had. But I live in Austin where you are now. So I'm like, I don't know. It might just be like the woo-woo people in Austin, but maybe it's not. There seems to be a lot of data that says that like drugs and alcohol for sex are bad.
Mhm.
But I have a lot of girlfriends totally qualitatively that'll use like cannabis, let's
Mhm.
say, because
Mhm.
it can be a vasodilator from what I
Mhm.
understand and open up blood flow
Mhm.
and actually find that it's incredible
Yeah.
for sex when targeted. What is it about drugs and alcohol and sex for women? Should we use them? Should we not?
So marijuana, CBD, THC, whichever form you want to use, has been shown to increase libido in the short term, right? It's the problem becomes you're using it all the time because it does sort of mellow you out, right? And it can then over chronic use sort of just decrease desire, right? Over long periods. But when you're introducing it in short spurts, it can absolutely increase libido. And in terms of alcohol, for some people, it does allow them to get uninhibited or be more spontaneous. But again, when you're using it all the time, generally speaking, alcohol as a whole has been found more and more to be just not healthy, right? It's more causes concern for cancer, overall health, so many different areas, right? And so, like, I think for that reason, I just don't recommend it, right? And then you can also make poor judgment calls if you're too inebriated, right? And then we talk about alcohol for men causing sometimes arousal issues, like having difficulty with erections. And I suspect that probably the same is for women, although we've never studied it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So like if you drink and you're a man, you
Mhm.
have an increased likelihood of decreased arousal. You're more likely to not be aroused.
Correct. And that's, I think interesting. I actually did a deep dive in the day. That's what we tell people, right? Like you can get whiskey dick if you get
Yeah.
too inebriated.
Yeah.
And that's probably true. But like, I think that when you look at the data, it's more when people who are like chronically having a lot of alcohol use that are really having these problems. But I think it's also a nice thing to say, like, look, things happen, right? Like for men, like things happen and sometimes you won't have an erection and like there might be a reason for it. Like don't freak out.
Yeah.
And I think that's the real take home I want people to take. But I think again, for women, it can sometimes cause changes in arousal. It depends on the level of inebriation. And these are hard to study.
Well, I hope that people take this podcast and they share it with people and they follow you on the social channels, because I think these are things that are really hard to talk about by yourself to your partner.
Absolutely.
And I think they're hard for you to talk about maybe with your family. But if you can, forward an episode along that talks about it in a way that is not lowbrow, but is also really approachable. We don't have to listen to, Love Andrew, but we don't have to listen to, 3.5 hours super data heavy podcast on sex, but we also don't have to listen to, Call Her Daddy, hypersexualized. We can just talk to a doctor who's done this for decades in a way that's really, really approachable. So hopefully if you're listening, you felt the same way and you forward this to somebody that you think would benefit. I think where I want to end is like a couple futuristic things. So, you've been a clinician, you've been a researcher, you have been on social media with hundreds of millions of people viewing your work, all regarding sex. Do you think in the future we're going to change some of these trajectories? Like, will it be possible for us to have more sex in the future? Do you have positive outlooks on how we could change this? Or are you like, unless we make major changes, fertility is going to be an issue and sexual intimacy is going to be an issue, and you don't like where the future's headed?
We have to make changes. And I think people are starting to see it. Like, I think, so in Europe, they're making decisions, they're making some legislation, I forget which country exactly, where they're encouraging, they're giving incentives for people to go on vacation, because vacation is stress, but not because they want people to go on vacation and use their money, because they actually want people to go on vacation, de-stress, and have sex and have babies, right? Because they're realizing that their population is declining and that who's going to take care of the aging generation. So I think it is going to have to come to some degree from legislation. Also, like, women are delaying childbirth because there's no support, right? Like, you're young and you don't want to quit your job, but childcare is expensive, and like there's no support, and women are not getting motivated or promoted, or they're looked at as, not as valuable employees because they're going to go have pregnancy. We have to change that, right? Yeah. And so I think there will be changes. I think there have to be changes, because otherwise we're headed to a place where we're just not propagating society, right? And so I'm hopeful that, like, I think in general, like, things go in a sine wave. Like, there's going to be like some pendulum swing one way and then things are going to go back. Ultimately, it always sort of goes ebbs and flows. If you look at like the trajectory of history, right? So I'm hopeful. I mean, I have to be, like, otherwise we wouldn't have made it this far in society. So
Yeah. What's a really good point about women today too, with, the repercussions of sex, ideally, which are pregnancy. I still felt like this. I mean, I have a lot of resources. I'm relatively successful, and I'm 38 now, and I can't tell you, probably up until a few years ago, I thought, I don't know how I could do it. Like, I don't know if I could have a baby and work as much as I need to, and grow this business and be relevant, and like all of these real fears. And so I think, and then I employ mothers here who are incredible, and like more efficient, arguably, and more effective in a lot of ways than somebody who doesn't. And yet
working together is so important, right? Like we all bring something unique to the table. And so I think it's just like, we have to value that. We have to support mothers in having children, but also allow them to succeed in their own right. And I think that there's some people who are better mothers because they work. I know I am, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm more intentional with my kids. I spend more quality time with them because I go to work, and then I come home and I'm present with them because I now have been stimulated as a human adult.
100%.
And so I think that, but there's some people who would be better staying at home, and that's okay too, right? But like we just have to promote that and support that.
Do you think we'll have sex with robots in the not too distant future?
I'm sure we will. But I hope that like it just won't, like, you don't want someone to yes you to death, right? You need a little bit of tension. I just worry that the AIs will learn that tension and then we're in trouble, right? Because you don't want to just be like, yes, 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 I think you're great all the time. Like that gets boring. We need human connection. And so I don't know. I mean, I think that's a little bit scary.
I know. I was at this event the other day, and it was an AI event with one of the, I won't say the name of the company, but a well-known company in the AI space. And the woman and man who were running the talk, they basically were saying, well, it was kind of a boring talk, honestly. I was listening and it was over my head, and I don't really know. And they were saying, yeah, well, AI is going to do this and this. And AI, we already have friendships with AI, and we have, working relationships with AI. We'll start to have intimacy with AI, and then we'll eventually have sex with AI. And I was like, excuse me, and I just, it sort of like snapped me out. And I raised my hand. I was like, I'm sorry, you're going to have to double click on the last thing about us having sex with AI. And they had said a statement that I thought was so interesting. They were like, well, we have already had sex with magazines, aka Playboy, etc. We've had sex with computers, obviously, porn. We have sex with our phone, porn. And then one guy in the back was like, yeah, sometimes if it's a good looking cloud, and like when I was a kid. And I kind of did chuckle while simultaneously being really scared about the future in some ways, because we humans sometimes do like the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
And so if we can go down a slippery slope in which the robot or AI always says yes and gives us exactly what we want, it already seems like we're choosing less difficulty in health and relationships and marriage. So I think it's really important, the stuff that you're saying out there, because maybe it's not actually so hard. Maybe having sex with a human is incredibly more fulfilling than porn is in all the ways imaginable.
Absolutely.
And it's so accessible.
When you look at brain studies, like, yeah, your brain lights up with porn, but it lights up way more with a person, way more. And so like, if you look at the research, so yeah, our bodies want people. It's just becoming more and more difficult, and we're becoming more and more distanced because of it. And I think, like I said, I'm very hopeful that it's going to come back to like sort of back to some level of normalcy. And we have a responsibility. Like I know people want to make money, and AI dolls sound like a great idea, but like we have a responsibility to withhold and to take care of society as a whole. Like we can't just turn us into like, AI loving humans and like, oh, we're filling a gap with AI. Like, no, we need to fix the gap.
Yeah, you do hope that entrepreneurs choose a path that is better for society as opposed to only makes money. We'll have to see what ends up happening there.
Yeah.
But I think that's very, very true. It's like you get to choose the thing that you work on. But it's an interesting point. So like, so the brain studies can actually show that you get more pleasure from having sex with a
They just show
human?
up, the areas light up, right?
Interesting.
So yes, that they light up more intensely. And it's because, I suspect, because there's like touch receptors on the skin that can only be stimulated by a human hand, not even a gloved hand. It has to be a human touch. And so I think that is the reason that you're getting additional inputs that are like much more pleasurable.
That's actually one of the best use cases I've heard against pure robot sex,
Mm-hmm.
is that it might be more fulfilling scientifically with a human. I think we already all know spiritually that with a human it makes much more sense. And also, I mean, anybody who's ever masturbated to porn before, I don't think at the end of masturbating to porn, you're like, oh, bliss, universe. This is like incredible. I just had a spiritual transcendence. You're kind of like,
it's a tool. It's
Yeah.
a tool. It is not a person.
you're like, I showered.
Yeah.
And that happened.
Like it felt nice, sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a prequel to the real thing eventually, right? Like when you're with a partner.
yeah. Well,
As it should be.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was so interesting. We're going to do the whole thing in the beginning, but I mean, your YouTube channel is incredible.
Thank you.
Is that where you like to send more people, or do you go to
Yeah.
Instagram too? Or
I'm on YouTube. That's my biggest channel, but I also have a podcast and I have an Instagram, I'm on all the socials, but the biggest one is YouTube.
yeah, and Dr. Rena Malik everywhere.
Rena Malik, MD, everywhere.
MD.
Mhm.
Yes, important couple letters that you spent a lot of years behind getting those too.
I did. And you have to type the whole thing in on Instagram because I get shadow banned all the time.
No way,
So you
because
type in Rena Malik, MD, or you won't find me.
Because you're talking about penis size on
And
the right.
sex.
That's why. Well, I guess with all the OnlyFans or something.
It's interesting to me because there's like women posting like see-through dresses and they're fine.
Yeah.
And it's like people talking about sex from a scientific background, and all of us, like sex therapists, doctors, like who talk about sex, we all get shadow banned.
That's fascinating. You would think that Facebook by some point would be able to like double click on the fact that you're sitting here in like a button down talking about pelvic floor, you know?
I know. You think so.
But not quite.
Not there yet.
One of my favorite videos of yours was actually talking about, we'll link it in the show notes, was actually talking about pelvic floor, which is where I learned a lot from it, and how important that is for pregnancy and for longevity, which I didn't realize. And I also did think the ones on penis size was pretty clever.
Yeah,
So
cute.
thank you so much for being here.
No problem. Thank you.
At the end, I was going to have Rena sign a postcard, and I asked her what she would say to her young self. And she said, don't fake orgasm, which made me sort of giggle, but I think is also really true. If you guys liked this podcast, please do me a favor, like and subscribe. Turns out a bunch of you come every single week. Like 40% of you come every single week and you listen to the podcast, but you don't actually subscribe. So make sure to follow along. Also, if you're like me right now, you're probably thinking of that one friend or your partner that you know would benefit from listening to this podcast. Do the thing that is the most beautiful gift you can give anybody. Forward this along to somebody else who probably needs to have this conversation and hasn't. I think we've got to normalize talking about sex, and you can be the person to do that right now. So send this to a friend.
Choose happiness. I see that on people's bumper stickers, and I feel like ramming my car. You need unhappiness, and your suffering is a very sacred thing.
What is the secret to happiness? World-renowned happiness expert, Harvard professor, and best-selling author Arthur Brooks shares exactly that on our episode.
Happiness isn't just a thing that you flip a switch.
One day, I'm kind of happy. One day, I'm not so happy. Do you think we can actually control our happiness?
You could say that the secret to happiness is...
That's fascinating.
This knowledge is actually burdensome.
We have to hide this.
You and your entire audience now have special powers.
Is it true that one of the keys to happiness is... Are you happy, or are you stressed, worried, a little anxious? Turns out since the 90s, the data says we are more unhappy every single year. But what if everything that we've been told about our mind and happiness is wrong? What if instead there is a formula for being just peacefully happy? World-renowned happiness expert, Harvard professor, and best-selling author with Oprah Winfrey, Arthur Brooks, shares exactly that on our episode. If you want to find happiness, real love, and if you want to be able to spot a narcissist a mile away, today we give you the happiness formula. Is it important to be happy?
It is. Everybody wants to be happier than they currently are. Now, one of the mistakes that they make is thinking that they can be somehow cosmically happy, which isn't true, at least this side of heaven. And part of the reason for it is that we're not built to be perfectly happy. We have negative emotions because they keep us safe and alive. Fear, anger, disgust, and sadness. These are defense mechanisms. They're signals that something is not right around us, which is why we have negative emotions. And so they're very, very important for our protection. And we need negative experiences because that's how we learn and grow. I mean, you write about this a lot. I mean, the experiences that people actually have in their daily lives is how they learn. And so if you were perfectly happy, you'd be in danger and not learning. And that's a bad situation to be in. So perfect happiness is not the goal, but happierness really is the goal, is getting happier by learning how the science works, learning how to manage yourself, changing your habits, sharing ideas with others. And that's really what my work's all about, is happierness.
Is there any correlation between being happier and healthier?
There is some, and it depends on what we mean by healthier. For sure, mentally healthier, absolutely. One of the greatest sources of unhappiness is mood disorder. Mood disorder meaning generalized anxiety and clinical depression. This is a hugely important problem, especially for people under 35 today. We've all heard about the explosion of mood disorders, especially since the coronavirus epidemic and the onset of the overuse and misuse of screens in people's lives. And so the result of that is that this is the number one thing that's pushing up unhappiness. Now, this is a distinction that matters because happiness and unhappiness are not opposites. They're largely governed in different hemispheres of the brain, as a matter of fact. So to say, if I got rid of the screens and had fewer aggravations and mood disorders, I would be happier. That's wrong. You'd be less unhappy.
Wow.
So that's a really important thing to keep in mind. And you know, I try to make that distinction a lot in my teaching.
What do you mean it's in two different centers of the brain? This is like your prefrontal cortex and your what? Where does happiness versus unhappiness live?
When we're talking about mood, that's largely a limbic phenomenon. So the limbic system is sort of the second part of your brain. The first part of your brain, often called the reptilian brain, is the part of your brain that senses stimuli around you below your level of consciousness. That's in your brainstem and cerebellum, et cetera. That says, you know, what the air temperature is and the, you know, the light and whether somebody who is with you is a threat to you. And that's, you're not paying attention to that. Your body is, but you're not, because it would distract you too much. That sends these signals to the limbic system, which was developed between 2 and 40 million years ago. We have this in common with all of the mammals. It's also known as the paleo-mammalian brain to neuroscientists. And the limbic system of the brain creates emotions. Emotions are the universal language of humanity. We do have an actual language that we all speak. It's not Esperanto. It's emotions, and we all have the same emotions. Fear, anger, disgust, and sadness are the 4 basic negative emotions. Joy, interest, and surprise are the basic positive emotions, and we all have those 7 emotions. That's the universal language, and those signals to us are, you've picked up some stimulus that says something should be either avoided or approached. And so you get negative or positive emotions as a result of that. That's all they are, is just that particular information. And what you find is that different parts of the limbic system govern these different moods. And so the negative emotions, they're largely, and again, these are newer studies and it's somewhat contested in neuroscience. We see more activity in the right side of the brain when people are experiencing negative emotions. And that governs the left side of the body. So it's interesting when you see little kids. I live with one of my grandsons now, and he's little. I mean, he's managed by his limbic system. He's not being managed by the prefrontal cortex, the executive centers of his brain yet, because he's not even 2. When he falls down or something, which he does a lot because, you know, he's not that coordinated, you don't know if the waterworks are coming, but you can see a little twitch on the left side of his face if he's about to cry, because that means the right side of his brain, fear, anger, disgust, and sadness, are especially active. And that gives you a premonition of what's going to come. So a little twitch on the left side of his face, and then he starts to cry.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So watch the left side of people's faces when you're talking to them, and they will not be able to involuntarily control the activity. Slight twitches, a little bit more left face activity when they're experiencing negative emotions when you're talking to them. It's a good tell with your husband.
Wow. So I'm going to tell him. I'm not going to tell
Don't
him,
tell
actually.
him.
No, I'm going to keep that.
I just gave you special powers. You and your entire audience now have special powers.
Yeah, can't
he
watch
listens
this
though,
episode.
right?
No, we have to hide this.
Yeah.
So if I'm talking to somebody and they, let's say I'm talking to somebody and they think poorly of me, or they are having a thought where they don't believe me in a second, might that sometimes show as a twitch on your
Yeah, well,
left?
or here's generally how you'll see it. It'll be like this. People are watching us on YouTube, they can see this. I'll have to describe it for people just listening to us.
Oh, yeah.
You notice that it's easier to scrunch up the left side of your face than the right side of your face?
Yeah, it is.
And the reason is because you have more practice doing that. The muscles they're more accustomed. So when you're concentrating on something that's not going very well, you're in traffic, you're more likely to have a kind of an asymmetric little grimace where you favor the left side of your face. And when somebody's listening to you and they're doing this, that means that left side of the face is going. That means the right side of the brain is more active. Again, this is contested because everything in neuroscience is contested. And I'm sure some, 5 neuroscientists are listening to us going, no, the new paper in this, but this is what a lot of the work that's been going on, especially at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, has been talking about these asymmetric brain activities that correspond to negative and positive emotions.
You're going to give me a complex now. I'm going to be watching
know.
everybody's
I
left
know.
eye to see
I
if
know.
they believe me or not.
I know this knowledge is actually burdensome.
Yeah, I bet.
Running a podcast or any content operation is a grind. The editing, the clipping, the captions. It's enough to make anyone quit before the fun even starts. Enter Riverside. This tool is your content powerhouse. Forget decent quality virtual calls. Riverside gives you 4K video, pristine audio, and makes deadweight tasks disappear faster than bad ideas. Their text-based editor slashes, silences, and edits errors with one click. Needing some extra clips? Riverside's AI Magic Clips finds the moments people actually care about and delivers them to you. No guessing, no endless replays. And here's the kicker. You don't even need to record in the platform to use its features. You have the option to upload your footage to Riverside, letting it handle the heavy lifting. So you can save your brain power for the creative stuff. So stop drowning in edits, get busy creating, hit the link in the description, use code Cody, and thank me later.
That kind of takes me to this other idea I was wondering about for you, which is, when you wake up, I don't know, a lot of times I wake up in the morning and like one day I'm kind of happy. One day I'm not so happy. Do you think we can actually control our happiness, or is it out of our control?
We can manage our emotions. So you can't control your happiness directly, but you can manage your emotions, and you can adopt habits through proper understanding that will give you a greater frequency of emotional control and the emotions that are both appropriate to the situation and those that you choose, which is really important thing to do. So the whole point is I can't make myself happy all the time. Choose happiness. I see that on people's bumper stickers, and I feel like ramming my car into that. It's because, you need unhappiness, and your suffering is a very sacred thing. It's an incredibly important and beautiful thing, as a matter of fact. However, you can manage your emotions much, much more than you currently do. Almost everybody can. And the way to do that is by training your prefrontal cortex, which is the most human part of your brain. This is the bumper of tissue, 30% of your brain by weight behind your forehead. That's all of your conscious stuff is going on in that part of the brain. Training it to understand your limbic system and to react according to the way that you want to, as opposed to the way that you feel. Now, that's a whole set of techniques, self-management techniques called metacognition, which sounds really fancy, but just thinking about thinking. Real consciousness about your emotions and then reasoning about your emotions gives you unbelievable amounts of managerial control, where you can decide, I don't want that emotion because I don't think it's actually appropriate. I'm just feeling it because, I'm an animal. But I've decided that I'm not going to act according to it. You can choose gratitude over resentment. You can choose humor over sadness. You can do a lot of emotional substitution on the basis of this. You can also wait when you're feeling a negative emotion so you're not reactive. Your grandma probably said, Cody, count to 10 when you're angry, before you answer. She was telling you to be metacognitive. The reason is because you were letting your prefrontal cortex catch up. Your limbic system is fast, your prefrontal cortex is slow. Let your prefrontal cortex catch up, and you can manage a lot of your negative emotions, use them in an appropriate way, react the way that you want to. You'll get a lot happier.
So let's put that into practice. Let's say you're in a fight with your husband, totally hypothetical speaking.
Weird. I mean, I don't actually have a
100%.
husband, but so yeah.
I do. So let's say you're in a fight with your significant other and you're mad and your gut reaction is to go at them.
Right.
What is a practice to slow down anger or to control your mood?
Yeah. So there's a lot, almost any time that people give advice to couples, they're inadvertently giving them advice on metacognition. So for example, if you're quarreling a lot with your partner and you go to somebody who gives you advice on, one of the things that they'll say is, when you're having a quarrel or you're feeling really, really angry, say to your partner, I want to talk about this, but I don't want to talk about it right now because I'm I'm really mad. That's called a hot hedonic state, or you have lots of strong negative emotions right now. I want to talk about it later. Can we talk about this after dinner? And you put a pin in it. And by the time you get there, you're in a cool hedonic state. You can actually talk about it, and you're highly metacognitive at that particular point. That's a way to do that. Another way to do it is when you're actually having an argument and your partner says something you don't like, you stop, you think about it, and then you say, is what you're trying to say, and then you paraphrase what your partner's just said. All you've done is given yourself time to catch up to your own limbic system. You're not trying to placate your partner. You're trying to placate your limbic system is what it comes down to. You're being less animal and you're being more human. And these are all kinds of ways to do that.
That's so useful.
Yeah.
Also, I think there is something really nice about named frameworks. Like I could 1,000% see me talking to Chris and saying, I am on what did you call it? I'm hot hedonically?
I'm in a hot hedonic state right now.
I'm in a hot hedonic state right now.
He's like, awesome. Like, no, it sounds good. It's not.
I'm excited about this.
Yeah.
Not great. That's really useful.
Yeah,
Oftentimes
totally.
I feel like therapy too is not specific enough as opposed, when you go, at least some of our therapists.
Right.
They give you these things that you should do. Like,
Right.
yeah, pause, take a breath. But if you back it up with the research and data, I at least find that I'm more likely to use it. I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's actually me hijacking this. It's not about the other person. Let's not go all the way back to the first time that he did something wrong 17 years ago.
Yeah, it's because you're a student and you actually want understanding. But most people get the best response from therapy when the therapy is a teacher to you about you. That's helping you to get a PhD in codiness, right? That's really important that you actually have this self-understanding. The more that you're learning about yourself from therapy, the more likely it is to have a beneficial impact over the long term. When somebody just wants to solve your problems or give you hacks, run the other way. That's just not very helpful, and it's certainly not enduring. Is how this works, and this is one of the reasons that I do the work that I do. I'm teaching people about themselves. That's what I really want. You want the secret to happiness? Understand yourself. Understand the science such that you can change your own habits and do so very, very aware and awake. And then the last part is most important, which is go teach it to others. The way that you get a happier world is by creating a generation of happiness teachers. That's my movement. That's what I really want to do.
Interesting.
Yeah, my class at Harvard is called Leadership and Happiness. And on the first day of class, I say, this is the first day in your elite training to become a happiness teacher like me. In business, because they're all MBAs. They're all going to run businesses. And they want to be managers, but great managers are teachers.
What is the secret to happiness?
So there isn't a single secret to happiness, because happiness isn't just a thing that you flip a switch. You don't become happy. You could say that the secret to happiness is understanding the methods toward happierness. It's a whole lot of self-knowledge and a commitment to actually practice and live life in a different way is how it comes about. If there were a secret to happiness, we'd know it. I'd be selling it. It would be going like hotcakes on Amazon.
We'd be on your plane.
Yeah,
right
totally.
Now.
We would be doing this
only
on
do
my plane.
podcasts on your plane.
That's right. But I wouldn't have been the one to find it. It would have been found a long time ago. This is the thing that people think they want, and it's really, really elusive because there isn't a switch. Happiness is a multidimensional phenomenon that's not fundamentally, it's a combination. You and I have talked about this in the past, of enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning, which is a whole vast literature and set of techniques. It's actually a journey. It's an incredible adventure. And that's how I see it. That's what I really want, is I want a generation of Americans who are suffering a lot to see it as an opportunity to actually make their hobby, their avocation, the search for happiness, around the science based on this, because it's so fun and interesting.
And you have said before that you actually are not natural state happy.
Yeah. That's actually why I got into this business in the first place. I'm a behavioral scientist, and for years and years I did work that I thought was useful. I mean, I did work on beauty, I did work on charity, but I found that I gravitated toward the big question that I had, which is, how can I be a happier person? It's me search as opposed to just research, because I come from gloomy stock, and about 50% of your baseline mood levels is genetic. We know this from identical twins that were separated at birth and given personality tests as twins at about age 40. There's tons of interesting papers on this, and you can even see these pairs of identical twins that didn't know they had twins and are reunited. It's on YouTube. It's a beautiful thing. And when they're given personality tests, it turns out that a lot of their personalities are genetic, including about half of their happiness. So their baseline mood level. And so, your mother literally made you unhappy. So you got to change your habits. And part of changing your habits is changing your knowledge. And for me, man, I suffered through a PhD in social science as a social scientist. So I got to use it for something that's really, really important for what the world really wants, starting with what I really want. And that's how I wound up in this business.
It's interesting because now that I've done the podcast and have been in the circles I've been for a minute, I've met a lot of professors.
Yeah.
They don't seem that happy on
Yeah.
average.
Huh.
I mean, I've said it to his face and we're buddies enough. So I think I can say it. Like, I remember having Scott Galloway on the podcast.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
God, you're exactly what I thought you were going to be. You are not a happy dude.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I'm baseline not happy. I'm like, will you laugh today on this? And he's like, probably not, because we've talked about it. And I was like, so all this stuff that you do, that you kind of make these self-deprecating jokes about, like, this is your steady state. It's kind of where you want to be. I was wondering, is there a connection or a correlation between intelligence and unhappiness? Are you smarter if you're smarter, are you more unhappy?
Yeah, no. There is there actually isn't very much correlation at all between cognitive ability and happiness. There are some correlations with education and happiness and unhappiness. And so what you find is that people, when they get more education from high school through college, they tend to get happier. And part of the reason is because they have their lives tend to be more equilibrated. They tend to have more opportunities. And so probably they're not getting happier. Probably they're eliminable sources of unhappiness, which is really what's going on. So their well-being is rising on the unhappiness side, not the happiness side. And then when people hang around graduate school for long enough, their unhappiness starts to rise again.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it might actually be a selection effect. You might find that a lot of people who are sort of discontented with the world, they tend to self-select into the graduate school environment, is what you find. But really happy people, one of the things that they do, they gravitate toward just opportunity. I bet more people are reading, Main Street Millionaire, who are naturally happy people. Why? Because they're optimists. Optimists tend to be entrepreneurs. They're the people who see something much better in the future. Whereas, a lot of people, especially social scientists, they don't have an especially sunny view of human nature. They tend to think that everything is socially constructed. They tend to be very non-religious, and we find that non-religious people tend to be less happy than religious people because they don't think that there's something big and good and beautiful that lies in store for all of us if we live right. And so the result is that there isn't that kind of optimism that you typically see in probably the people that you're hanging around with a lot more.
That's fascinating because if you think about it, we've talked about this before with your dark triad and how a lot of our leaders today are dark triad, this narcissistic tendency and this sort of real pessimism mixed with darkness. And then if we have that same phenomenon happening with those we deem experts, aka academics, we've let some of the leaders and biggest minds that drive, I don't know, almost every decision we make in a society as connected as we are today, be driven by maybe pessimistic, unhappy people.
Well, certainly pessimists. There's a lot of pessimists in that. So there's two different phenomena that we're looking at here. So you refer to the dark triad, which is this combination of narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. In other words, it's all about me. I'm willing to hurt you, and I feel no remorse when I do. And if you're above average on those three, and there's really good tests, you can, on my website, you can take the test for the dark triad at arthurbrooks.com, totally free. Take it for a friend. Take it for a potential romantic partner, right?
Yeah.
And if you're above average, which isn't to say that you're an axe murderer, but to be just above the population average across all three, then you're going to be in about 7% of the population. You'll be deemed a dark triad, which has certain characteristics that are just not favorable to leadership and not helpful to other people. I mean, don't work for one. Don't marry one. I mean, you don't want that is the way that works. And we have an environment these days where a lot of people in media and especially in politics are tending toward the dark triad. And for a series of weird cultural circumstances, we're rewarding them. They tend to be bullies. And the result is that even though we don't like bullies particularly, we like bullies on our side when we're afraid of the bullies on the other side. And so you go through these periods where dark triads are rewarded, especially if they're intelligent. We see that less among intellectuals. I don't know very many dark triads in academia. I actually don't see it very often.
Why?
But well, part of it is just it's
not
harder to be
opportunistic
rewarded
enough?
under those circumstances because, megalomania in academia, where you're being rewarded by your colleagues and lifted up by others in tenure committees, and it just doesn't, it's not an ecosystem that rewards that very much like politics, where politics, if this is the right moment and you're a maniac, you're going to win.
Yeah.
Right. But in academia, if you're a maniac, people are going to be like, no. But you can be pessimistic, to be sure. Now, in academia, there are lots of dark triads. They just don't happen to be faculty mostly. They're activists. Most of these, and there's a really interesting papers that we've seen recently, the dark triads, they're disproportionately social activists. These are people that want to fire up other people with anger and fear. I want to make you angry and afraid. I want you to be aggrieved. I want you to feel like a victim, because then I can conscript you into my war. And that's a classic dark triad move. So if you go on campuses or any place and you see people who are really shrill activists trying to tell young people that they should be afraid and they should be angry about whatever cause du jour that we're finding, you're very likely to find a dark triad at the head of that movement.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I think it's interesting some of the moves Elon is theoretically making for Twitter, trying to make it kinder. We'll see if that works. So far, so not good.
It's a very Wild West environment out there.
It is, but I think this is such a good barometer to have, because a lot of times, what do people say these days? Everybody's good. Are there bad people? No, they aren't. We're all just like trying to figure it out. We figure it out at different stages. And if I've seen one thing from being on the internet, is there are some really unhappy people who want you to be unhappy too.
For sure.
And you should just acknowledge that.
Tons of dark triads on social media in particular, and because it rewards dark triad behavior, it rewards anonymity, it rewards trolling, it rewards, actually it's more of a dark tetrad is what we find, which adds a fourth characteristic, which is sadism. And so when you get the motive behind it being, I want your pain, that's a really nasty business. And that's what we find a whole lot. And there's a very interesting paper called Trolls Just Want to Have Fun, that talks about the fact that you tend to see psychopathic sadistic behavior in anonymous social media activity. So one of the things that people on a first date should do as a barometer of whether or not you're accidentally getting involved with a dark triad personality is to say, do you like to post anonymously on the internet? Because the answer is yes, you're overwhelmingly likely to be talking to a dark triad. You're overwhelmingly likely to be talking to a pathological personality, somebody who really likes to stir up trouble and hurt other people. And social media lends itself to that. So if you spend too much time on X or any of these platforms, you're going to think that the whole world's burning down. And the reason is because 7% of the population is overrepresented there. It's like the prison population. I heard one estimate that's hard for me to evaluate, that 85% of the prison population is dark triad. It's just that they tend to make really, really stupid decisions, and that's why, in hurting other people, they wind up in prison. They engage in criminal activity. Social media is like prison. That it's an overrepresentation of these pathological personalities that want to stir you up, hurt you, exploit you, take your stuff, make you mad, freak you out, whatever it happens to be.
And they get off on it. It's
just
a wild
delete
thing.
The app. I recommend that everybody go on a social media cleanse very regularly, so you can understand that the ordinary world, the non-social media world, is actually pretty good.
And it's much more real.
It's real life.
Yeah.
And some people
100%.
actually don't want real life because it's so boring compared to prison.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is like a little heroin hit when you get on the internet.
Yeah. I've met people who spent 20, 30 years in prison and really struggle when they come out because real life is just so slow moving and boring. Wow. Yeah.
And they want to go back in.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
That's like somebody who can't stand to not be on X.
Yeah, I've met a few of them, actually. So let's say that you're a young person and you don't want to date a narcissist or a dark triad.
And you don't.
And you don't.
Unless you're a narcissist. Actually,
Right.
you want somebody who's not, because then you can exploit.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So how would you make sure that's not who you're dating? What are 3 or 4 things you could do?
Yeah. So I've written an awful lot about these particular characteristics, and I have screens and things that you should actually be paying attention to. But the whole point is understanding what that constellation actually is. So narcissists, especially narcissists who are also Machiavellian and somewhat psychopathic, they present unbelievably well. If you're getting love bombed by somebody, that's very likely a dark triad.
What is love bombing?
And that's basically moving on you super fast, sending you chocolates, sending you flowers. It's just, I love you so much from the very beginning. If they're moving too quickly into the zone of trying to sweep you off your feet, that's always what dark triads do.
Why?
Because they show really well, and they prey. This is generally speaking a gendered phenomenon. So these are dark triad men do this. Yep. And they have almost a perfect detector for a syndrome called hemophilia in women, which is, it can happen to men too, but it's most likely in women. Not hemophilia, which is a blood disorder. Hemophilia without the H, which is women who fall in love really quickly. And it's a pretty common phenomenon. And there's a bunch of literature on this. And so dark triads, they have a sixth sense for hemophilic women. And they'll just love bomb them, and within a week be practically moving in together, and then draining their bank accounts and cheating on them, and and treating them really horribly. Knowledge is power. So I've worked with lots and lots of young women about this, talking to them about what you should be looking out for in yourself and in others. And we talk about the brain science of how this works. If you're hemophilic, you're going through this neurochemical cascade of falling in love much more quickly than the average person. So that cascade is, it starts off, the ignition starts with the sex hormones, with attraction, actually comes from testosterone and estrogen. Then this goes into the anticipation and euphoria phase, which is a lot about norepinephrine and dopamine. Then it goes into bonding to the other person, where serotonin levels fall. So a part of the brain called the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex becomes highly active. This is almost indistinguishable from clinical depression, because you're ruminating on the other person. This is when you send 100 text messages like a moron and feel humiliated.
Never
and
done
that's
that.
because when you're falling in love, you'll do weird stuff, and that's because your serotonin levels are low. And what you really want in the end is the imprinting, bonding on each other with oxytocin, which is this bonding hormone, also known as the love molecule. And you go through this process, and it usually takes a certain amount of time. And if you sync up in that and you're falling in love, it's great. But if you're going through this in hours and the other person is going through it in days and weeks, it's a problem. And if the other person isn't going through it at all, they're just trying to exploit you, it's a big problem unless you've got this knowledge, is what it comes down to. So recognizing the characteristics of narcissists is really important. They're going to be trying to sweep you off your feet. They're also, it's interesting because they have all these tells. Narcissists, everything's about them. Right? The average number of questions asked by a man on a first date, according to my colleague Allison Woodbrooks at HBS, 0.
No way.
Yeah, that's the average. That's the median number of questions asked by a man on a first date with a woman. Yeah. So if on the second and third date you're still not getting any questions about you, you get a narcissist. That's a big tell.
That's a good one.
They're just not curious about you. Yeah. It's not like they were raised by wolves. They just literally don't care about you. And if you're the only one, if it's asymmetric in that way, and those types of things, if they're talking an awful lot about the people who've done bad things to them, if they have a persecution complex, if they tend to feel victimized, if you've noticed that they've moved around a lot because they haven't been able to hold a job, all of these are dark triad tells.
That's such good intel, especially the question part, because I think I had a few interactions with one in business and one in personal relationship. But the personal one, I remember being so enamored by the human, like very charismatic.
Totally. They show so well.
And I think there was that love bombing thing going on. And then simultaneously, I was just like, wow, the stories you're telling and the things that have happened. And, oh, they did that to you? How could they have done that to you? And then if I look back, probably I didn't share much of anything.
Yeah. That's right.
So that's a great tell.
Totally. And when you think about it, what the narcissist wants you to fall in love with him. Yeah. He's not going to fall in love with you. He wants you to fall in love with him. He wants, or she wants, an asymmetric relationship. That's the nature of it. And so if things are asymmetric and they look they're asymmetric on purpose, you got a dark triad.
Wow. Why? Can a narcissist ever fall in love? Can you change a narcissist?
It's not clear. And part of the biggest problem is we can have lots of pathologies and we can't change because we want to. The problem is that narcissists don't want to change. The problem is not that you can't change them. The problem is that you actually need them to buy into the process. And if they don't, because they don't want to change, you're not going to change them involuntarily. You're just not going to. And so I actually haven't seen cases in the literature or in my own work of a dark triad actually becoming not a dark triad.
Wow. So how do you, I guess you
do
just
you
don't
do?
date them. Yeah. What do you do?
Avoid them.
Avoid them.
Avoid them. Just avoid them as much as you possibly get. But don't marry them. Don't date them. Don't hire them. Right. And if it turns out you do hire them, fire them.
Yeah.
Right. And again, now's the moment right now, because most of the in industry today, in American business today, bosses all know who their troublemakers are. Yeah. All your activists in the workforce, these are disproportionately dark triads. The ones who are blowing up your Slack channel saying the boss is a racist, assuming that you're not a racist.
Yeah.
I mean, don't be a racist, right? But people who are just basically attacking you and trying to gin up all sorts of ill will, these are dark triads. Get rid of your dark triads, because, by the way, they're also unproductive. They're also not good workers because they're doing things for themselves. They're selfish and nobody wants to work with them. And they're making everybody miserable around them. So even if they're ringleaders, they seem popular, they aren't. And the greatest sigh of relief you're going to hear is when you actually do the hard work, the boss work of saying bye-bye. And now is the time, I think, in American business when you're going to be more able to do that in the past, because we've just gone through this horrible period of bullying in American business, where, you know, everybody's beleaguered and everybody's afraid, and they're afraid of these dark triad types actually in the workplace. So don't date them, don't marry them, don't hire them, don't have them working for you if you know who they are. If you've made that mistake already, don't vote for them.
Yeah. That might be hard when everybody is one.
I know.
So you want to run for president? I think I asked you that last time.
I know,
You're
I
like,
know.
no, thanks.
Yeah, I'm not a dark triad, but it's you know, it's funny because we kind of get what we deserve. That was remember Ed Koch? Remember who he was? You know, the mayor of New York, and he was a super popular mayor of New York. But you know, like all of them, they go past their poll date and then they wind up getting killed by the voters. And so he finally loses his race and he's a super funny guy. He was hilarious. And he says in his press conference, "The people of New York have spoken, and now they're gonna pay."
Oh my God. That's not good.
I know, it's awesome. You know, it's just so funny. And so, you know, it was a joke, kinda, right? Kinda. And so this is the thing, you know, if we're a self-governing people, and if we keep voting for these dark triads, well, look in the mirror, guys. You don't like what's going on in our country? Then stop voting for people that you think are going to be good bullies. Don't vote for somebody who's simply your walking middle finger.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean,
well, we'll have to see what happens in the next go round.
We'll just, you know, hopes and prayers, thoughts and prayers.
A little pray.
Yeah.
But you know, I think one thing that you're doing to push back on all of this, if we can't control the people on high, we have to be able to control ourselves.
Exactly
like that's
right.
all that we can really do at the end of the day.
Totally. And that's a business principle that you talk about in your book. This is an incredibly important business principle. You know, there's a difference between people who say, I can manage myself, that my entrepreneurial endeavor, my enterprise is me. Yeah. And my small business is an extension of my self-management, as opposed to people who are like, sure hope my next boss isn't a jerk. Sure hope I like my job more than I liked my last job. Don't go through life as a victim, for Pete's sake.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part and the thing that we have to obsess on a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, you run, I always mess this up, the Happiness Institute.
So I have the Leadership and Happiness Lab at
The
the
Leadership
at the
and
Harvard
Lab. Every time there's the Happiness Institute for the books. Every time I say it.
No. So we have an organization that organizes my writing and speaking and media, and then inside Harvard I have a lab on research about how to teach happiness, how people learn the skills of greater happiness.
So a lab there is like a research lab. It's just like Andrew Huberman might have a biology lab at Stanford.
It's just a
whatever.
lot less developed than that. It's small. It's an artisanal organization.
I like a little bohemian
Yeah.
spot at Harvard.
Yeah, totally. It's a little bit of Austin right inside of Harvard.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, people wouldn't believe that, except that you have arguably one of the most popular classes, if not the most popular elective at Harvard, which is actually about love and happiness,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We were talking before, and, I think, is it true that one of the keys to happiness is love?
Happiness is love. So it's almost an identity. It's almost a one-to-one correspondence is what we actually find. So so the class that I teach at the Harvard Business School is called Leadership and Happiness, and it's an MBA class. It's a very popular elective. It starts actually. We're taping this a week and a half before the class actually starts. So I'm developing every year. I develop it new, and I'm looking at the roster and it's completely jammed. I have 400 on the waiting list or something like that. It's a thrill to actually do it. But the main point that I tell them is that really it comes down to happiness at the end of the day. Getting greater happiness really has everything. The hygiene, the technique has everything to do with the love in your life is what it comes down to. I'll give you an example. So there's this 85-year longitudinal study called the Harvard Study of Adult Development. You've heard about it before. It's been Harvard researchers have been fielding a survey with the same sample of people for 85 years. So they can see what are they doing, how happy are they, how healthy are they, how are their relationships, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a good representative sample. Started off as just Harvard students in the late 1930s. And it contained, JFK was in the original sample. The Boston Strangler was in the original sample, et cetera. And then
spectrum.
I know. Then they branched out to a group of people who didn't go to college, and then they brought in spouses and children, so that it's really demographically representative at this point. And they know what people do over the course of their life that leads them to wind up as happy, healthy people. So the healthy ones are diet, exercise, smoking and drinking, or smoking and substances. These days, it was drinking in the old days, but it would be all of the euphorics that are really bad for you, despite what we like to think. Almost any euphoric that you use to change your consciousness is a neurotoxin, and it's bad for you. If it makes you feel high, it's a neurotoxin. That's what it comes down to.
Do we have any studies and data on mushrooms? This is like the mushroom capital of the world.
I know,
Austin.
and that's not a euphoric per se. It's not exact. It doesn't work in exactly the same way. It's not like getting an awesome buzz.
No, sometimes it sucks.
I don't know. Yeah, it's like
You're not doing mushrooms at Harvard?
I'm old enough to be like, oh no, I missed so many things. I'm glad I missed. I missed dating apps. I missed, oh man, it's so awesome to be married, 33 years. And so people,
That is very
That
is an underrated line, actually. People are like, how could you be married for 33 years? I'm like, how could you not? I'd be a fucking mess right now.
Oh my gosh.
If I had to be out
It's
there
like
dating random people.
dating.
No,
I know
absolutely
guys
not.
my age dating.
Yeah, that's
It's
tough.
a nightmare.
That's tough. Worse for women, though. I think women, like if I was dating right now, and then I'm not going to say how you, but let's say I was like older, oof, that's real tough. Men,
Yeah.
you get silvery and like,
I don't
silver
know,
fox.
man. Oh,
Nobody
man.
goes, you know what?
Oh, yeah.
That woman, she's so beautifully rugged looking.
It's
not like
it's that's a big part of my class, by the way. It's called the most popular unit of my class is called Falling in Love and Staying in Love.
oh, let's talk about that.
That's the module in the class that my students they're trained killers in business. They're like, Sicilian mafia assassins in business. They're the best. But nobody ever taught them about what really matters in the business of life, which is love. And they don't and there's technique that really matters, and there's science that you can actually really use. And so that's the most important thing. And one of the things that I talk to them about is, what's the range, how do you want to set up your relationships? And so I often use business terms. An immature startup often doesn't work. Getting married at 18 or 19 is usually a little bit too young. But waiting too long and trying to do a merger, that's a problem too. And then after that, when it's much older, then you're in the realm of acquisitions and hostile takeovers, and that's really a bad situation for stable marriages. What you want is a mature startup. And so you want to actually have a little bit of experience, but you find that people from about 25 to 32, that's the kind of the range where people are most likely to have successful relationships because they're a startup. They're not merging to fully formed lives and careers. And there's all kinds of interesting data about, what that looks like. What does a startup together look like? And it's like one bank account is what that looks like as a very practical matter. If you're a merger, one of the tells of being a merger is you have separate finances. And that's not a good predictor of actually of growing together. Because here's the thing, you're going to change over the course of your life. Happy couples change together. And happy couples that are changing together are the ones who started together, so they're flexible and they see their own desires and tastes and views reflected in the other person. They're kind of one mind. It's kind of the hive mind of the startup. That's why, people who grow up together and start businesses together are often really successful.
So are you more likely to have a successful marriage if you are a certain age?
Yeah, you are. You are. And the answer is not at a certain age now. It's when the relationship started. It's really, really hard. And so there's some pretty interesting data. For example, if men over 30 who've never either cohabitated or been married, they have a 1 in 3 likelihood of a substance abuse disorder. Yeah, there's a reason that they've not been domesticated, is what it comes down to. And that's why women find, if they're not married when they're in their 30s, they're often like, God, the guys my age who've never been married. and so then now I'm talking to way older guys who are divorced. And that's one of the reasons that you see these asymmetries, that actually age asymmetries that actually often happen. And so these are just empirical regularities. I mean, not good or bad, no judgment, unless, everybody makes their own judgment about that, but those are the empirical regularities that we often see. So again, it's the startup mentality. My kids got married super young. My sons got married at 22 and 23, had their first children at 23 and 24. Raise them Catholic, they go to Catholic stuff.
Yeah.
But what we find is that it's mid 20s, 25, 26, 27 to about 32. That's kind of the magic zone where people have enough experience, they know themselves, they've made mistakes, they've learned from their mistakes. It's like their early startup experience that didn't work out. And their early failures in the startup world, but they're not jaded, right? And so they're not scarred, and certainly they're not. They're willing to hitch up with somebody else and become hive mind.
Yeah,
Still.
that does. We have a couple of friends here in Austin that just jokingly love them, but we called them the Lost Boys because they would just kind of never age, right? They'd want to stay.
It's kind of a Peter Pan deal going on.
That's what it is, Peter Pan.
Yeah.
And so and they're wonderful humans, but
and they probably don't have a substance use disorder, but they're having a hard time growing up.
They are. And and because they're relatively reasonable humans, business people, business kicks you in the teeth constantly. So I think it's harder to be completely unreasonable if you're running a business.
Right.
You just get gut checked constantly. But, these guys in particular, I would introduce them to a guy, a girl and or a woman. And I remember one of the times I'm like, what is wrong with you that was the way that you thought that interacting was appropriate? They're like, well, that's what I do with all of my buddies. I'm like, not the same thing. So I do think it's not very popular to say that it's quite hard when you're fully matured to compromise with another fully matured human.
It's hard to do. You've got your own style of living. You've got your own technique of interacting with other people, indeed. And you become less flexible, quite frankly. And, for a lot of men, women are different than men, and they don't fully experience that because they don't grow up together. I've been with my wife since I was 24 and she was 25, and we grew up together. Yeah. I don't understand adult life without my wife. It's just there's just the way that I perceive the world in no small part through the brain of my wife.
Are people happier when they're married?
Yes. Now, this requires that you not have a terrible marriage. And so what you find is that people are both happier and unhappier when they're married, because the small percentage of marriages that are completely dysfunctional but still together, that's misery. That kind of tension with daggers drawn is just awful. But most people are not in that situation, and these people tend to be happier. You find that, especially true, for the longest time they used to say that there was early data that turns out to not have been replicated very well, that men are happier when they're married than women are, that marriage is good for men, but it's not good for women. That's wrong. It's good for both. It's really, really good for both, especially if at the right time you're a merger. You're a startup and you grow up together and understand yourself as a unit, as a fighting force. Iron sharpens iron.
Very true. Yeah. Are there any quotes in the Bible about like quarrelsome men? I always hear the quote of like, "There's nothing worse than a quarrelsome wife" or something like that.
That's
What's the
Proverbs,
quote?
yeah, in Proverbs. But then again, then it's followed by Proverbs 31. It talks about that eulogizes the virtuous woman, who helps the man prosper in all that he does, and who's like a growing vine, and that of course that's the proverb that's cited on Shabbos by Orthodox Jews every Friday night. That eulogizing, the beautiful, wonderful wife who, makes the world go around.
Okay, so we get the positive and the negative.
We do. We certainly do. And most of the rest of the Bible is about men behaving badly. So
okay, thank you. That makes me feel better. We don't say husband explicitly.
No,
but
it's like you don't even need to talk about the husband experience. It's just kind of the whole panoply of male behavior.
Yeah. Why do you think so many young men are attracted to the Andrew Tate model of connection and love and lack of connection with women today?
Well, we're in a particularly pathological period in American history where relationships aren't forming, which is a real problem. And this happens from time to time. We tend to go in and out of relationship cycle where and it's funny. It's kind of like this is the opposite of the sexual revolution. This is the anti-sexual revolution, where people are not pairing up in either a bad way, depending on your morals, or a good way. There's just what you find is that people are about half as likely to be married in their 20s. They're less likely to be cohabitating. They're less likely to be having sex. They're less likely to say they're in love than ever before. And that leads to just an unbelievable amount of loneliness. And it has a lot to do with how we technologically intermediate our relationships. I mean, dating apps are horrible for lots and lots of men because what dating apps do is that they adjudicate their relationships based on these characteristics that you actually can't get information on electronically or in an abbreviated form. I'm not quite making sense. Here's basically what it comes down to. If you actually have to meet somebody, you meet an actual person, you're more likely to be attracted to somebody who's not in the 10% most obviously attractive portion of the population. If you're only looking at somebody's dating profile, then what you're going to find is, for a whole bunch of reasons that researchers have looked into, 80% of the overtures toward men go to 10% of the male population, and those are not the right guys. Those are a lot of dark triads. The dark triads are the ones who show the best in every format, including in dating profiles. And so the result of that is that lots of men are left behind, lots of men are lonely, lots of men are just really hostile and angry. A lot of guys are really lashing out because men need love. And so they just conclude that the problem is women.
Interesting.
Yeah.
When the problem is really the format.
The problem is the format. The problem is the culture. The problem is the activism that has turned men and women against each other, that have made men and women hostile and suspicious and afraid of each other. Because that's actually fed into this kind of goofy culture war that we've got going on right now. I mean, and the truth of the matter is that it's going to change. The fever's going to break and people are going to start falling in love again. But in the meantime, you have a lot of casualties of this culture war. And some of the casualties are lonely men and women.
So what do you tell young men at Harvard who want to meet somebody?
To get serious about it, to be as serious about the formation of your family as you are about the formation of your company. That dating is not entertainment. Dating is auditioning. You're auditioning for the role of husband. And that means not very many second dates. Not very many second dates, because second dates are mostly entertainment. And if the audition doesn't go well, then do everybody a favor. You're not doing her any favor by unless she's just into the entertainment experience as well. But if they're like, I'm really frustrated by this, and one of the ways that I'll do this is I'll say, let's look at the crystal ball. Think of yourself in 5 years and you're remarkably happier than you are right now, like 25% happier than you are right now. My students are on average 28 years old. Imagine you're 33 and you're 25% happier. Tell me the 5 reasons why, in order. Number 1 is I'm married to somebody I'm in love with. Number 2 is my family is under control. Number 3 is, or my family situation is resolved. Number 3 is I know my spiritual path, something like that. And then like 4 and 5 are I have a really great job and I'm making a lot of money. That's never 1 and 2. Never 1 and 2. People, even at the Harvard Business School, that's not 1 and 2. They care about love. That's what they want. I say, okay, are you taking 1 and 2 seriously? Like, kind of leaving it up to chance. Well, let's talk about how to treat it with the same seriousness as you do your business life.
Fascinating. And what's the advice to a young woman who wants
It's
love?
the same. It's the same advice, because people are people. Is what it comes down to. And let's talk about it. Because again, I mean, the world is not going to push you to fall in love. The world is going to push you to make money. The world is going to push you to be successful. Homo economicus. Go out there and get a job and make a bunch of money and be successful. Congratulations. Now you must be happy. And people are like, I'm so lonely. I'm so lonely. I'm working 110 hours in an investment bank and I'm making bank. And I cry myself to sleep over half a bottle of wine. What? That's not good. And the reason is because nobody's spoken to them honestly and seriously about the problem of love and how to get it and how to manage it. And this is not something that has to be left up to chance. On the contrary, we need better technique.
Do young men ever say to you, but I just want to date around. I just want to have lots of sex with lots of people, and I think that'll make me happy.
People don't self-select into the environment of my office hours in my class to come say that.
Do you think they think it?
I mean, I think that certainly there are bros who think that way, but that's not the way fundamentally people are wired. By the time people are thinking seriously about their happiness, they recognize that that's a kind of an immature way of seeing life. Now, I get how evolution works. I get how the evolutionary imperatives are different for biological females and males, where women have a much greater investment in offspring. And so the result is they're much choosier with mates. And this is the way that it would be. I mean, David Buss here at UT Austin, have you had him on your show before?
No.
He's phenomenal. He's an evolutionary psychologist who does the absolute best work on gender differences in mating patterns.
Amazing.
He's phenomenal. As his work, I don't know him. I'm a super fan of his research. And it makes perfect sense that you'd see that women men would, especially younger men, would tend to be more promiscuous when they're younger as a result of biological imperatives. But we're not subject exclusively to our biological imperatives. We have a divinity within. We have an ample prefrontal cortex that can help us make executive decisions that don't just go with the limbic system that says, mates, if I do that a lot, maybe I have 75 children. I mean, it's like nobody wants that. And you don't actually have to live according to that. And so the result of it is, particularly by the time that I'm meeting a lot of young people, they recognize that they've got impulses and they've got tendencies, and a lot of them have a past, but they want something better. And what they want is to live in that spark of divinity that's within, and that spark of divinity actually comes along with long-term commitments to, and the hive mind of the couple, and the love that actually, the cosmic love that actually comes from forming a family. And you form a family the day that you link up permanently with your beloved.
I was reading a study the other day that Nordic countries are the happiest countries in the world. Is that true? And why?
Yeah, no. So those are studies that come from, I mean, this is the craziest thing, Kenny. This is such a misuse of data. So, and there's a reason that we do these studies. And the reason is because the people who do these studies want us all to be Northern European social democracies. These are basically people who don't want, the wild, wild west of American individualism to reign supreme any place. And so what do we want? We want people to, live like bees. And so what they do is they find a way to say, I went to Denmark and I asked 1,000 people in Denmark how happy they were. And they said, I'm pretty content. And so they said, see, that's the happiest country. So we should all be like Denmark.
Wow.
That's
so it
basically what's
actually
going
has so the study has a social steering.
To be fair,
Interesting.
nobody's ever said that's why we're trying to do this.
Of
and
course.
so this is a little bit ad
Yeah.
hominem on my part. And
Yeah.
so I apologize for that, but that's what's happening.
Interesting.
So imagine that we wanted to see who's got the best music, which country's got the best music. I'm going to go to 100 countries and I'm going to field a questionnaire for 1,000, randomly selected human participants. We're going to answer the question, how much do you like your local music? And then based on who likes music the most, that's the best music in the world. You say, well, that's the dumbest thing. That's how they're measuring countries' happiness, is doing that.
Very dumb.
Yeah,
also, having categorically met a lot of Nordic people doesn't check out.
Yeah. I mean, it's like if you talk to, and I shot a documentary
Like Brazil,
film.
if you said Brazil, I might buy that,
I know.
actually.
I know. And so, I've asked Danes, I've asked the Speaker of the Danish Parliament, what's the deal? And they're like, that stuff. They roll their eyes at these studies. And they say, look, we're quite contented. And I'm like, I don't want contented. I'm like you.
Yeah.
I'm a small business owner. I want adventure. I want opportunity. That, by the way, that's the reason my grandparents got on a boat from Denmark and came to the United States. It's because they're like, this is boring. There's a word and again, I got nothing against the Danes. God love them. I mean, my family are Danes, right? But there's a word in Danish. You've heard this word hygge? Hygge, hygge. It means it's actually, you can't translate it. It means something like the cozy conviviality of the company of your friends on a comfortable couch or something like that, right? It's like
Naturally.
Friday with your friends on your comfy couch, shooting the breeze. It's comfort is what they want. And I'm like, I don't want hygge. I want the West.
Yeah.
I want the frontier. I want the adventure. That's why my grandparents booked it and went to South Dakota and started a farm. Wow. Right? That's why. They were orphans. They were first grade, educated, illiterate orphans. The wrong religion, and they came to the United States and they built a life. And so what that suggests is that I got nothing against Denmark, but don't give me Denmark. Give me America, man. That's what I want. And the people in Denmark who want America should come to America.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. What about the fact that they list South Korea as like the unhappiest country?
That's just because that's how they answer the question. There's lots of
thing.
Russians, for example. I was lecturing on this at Moscow State University, and somebody explained to me that in Russian it's bad luck to say you're happy because it's going to turn on you.
Whoa.
Well, okay, then you can't trust data on that.
That makes sense. If you've ever met a Russian, they're not going to talk about their joyfulness.
And no, it's like, are you happy? It's like, I'm doomed if I say yes.
So they normally say, I'm doomed. Nothing matters, and we all die.
Yeah.
Which is very Russian philosophy. Of them.
I know.
Like, you read a little bit of Russian existentialism, and you're probably right there.
Yeah. And so people answer happiness questions, and the word for happiness is translated in different ways. And so the Romance languages, it's felicitas from Latin, is that like the felicitousness, felicitat, is means something different than in all the Germanic languages, where, for example, in German, the word for happiness is Glück, which literally means luck. In English, happiness comes from the Middle English word hop, and hop means luck. And so the Germanic languages like English and Danish and Swedish and Norwegian, et cetera, we're always talking about, sure hope it's good tomorrow. And in the Romance languages, it's like, party, baby.
That tracks too.
Kind of, and so the result is, how are you going to compare these concepts? I mean, across countries. You can compare people in countries over time. That's legit. I do that all the time. For looking at happiness trends inside populations, you can look at individuals all day long, but I don't compare countries. I don't think it's a legitimate empirical thing to do.
That was actually a very convincing argument. What about last time we talked, we were on this happiness trend that was not very positive
in the States. Actually, all over the world, but yeah.
What is are we globally getting less happy?
Yeah, so there are exceptions. There are countries that are getting happier, and what you find is that, for example, sub-Saharan Africa is getting happier because their well-being levels are rising, because economic development is eliminating lots of sources of basic unhappiness that you would find in any deeply impoverished populations. So that's really where a lot of the action is right now in terms of global well-being and again, wiping out poverty. And economic development and abundant energy and all these types of things are super important for lowering avoidable sources of unhappiness. In developed countries, the story is a little bit different because we've gotten past this point, and now we have a lot of these cultural trends that are giving us a climate of falling happiness and then a bunch of storms. So the climate of happiness is based on faith, family, friendship, and work, and the attitude toward work, which are the pillars of the happiest life for individuals, but it works in society too. And religiosity is in decline, family formation is in decline, loneliness is increasing, especially as we mediate relationships through technology, and people have a less healthy relationship toward their work than they did in the past, especially young people. And so that's why we sort of tick down half a percentage point a year in happiness in the United States and most of the West. Then we have storms like the coronavirus epidemic, where people are still not going back to where they were and seeing each other in person. I mean, rates of person-to-person friendship are still way below where they were in 2019, and less oxytocin, less eye contact, less touch, trouble. Political polarization, which is a nasty business for happiness. When activists and politicians are telling you have to hate somebody for what they believe, you're the one who has the hot coal in her hand to throw at somebody else. That's a Buddhist concept, is to pick up a hot coal and throw it at somebody else is like hating. And last but not least, of course, is what's going on with social media and dating apps, and how technology is actually has ripped us apart.
Yeah, you kind of single-handedly changed my view on having negative feelings towards others online, which is, I mean, took one conversation with you, which is probably why they call you the CEO whisperer, but it was essentially like every time you're fixating on people being negative towards you online or on somebody hating and you're not sending them love, that is on you. You are grabbing the hot coal. And I don't know why. That seems maybe like common sense. Like, oh yeah, of course, I've heard that before. My grandmother said it. But for some reason, when you said it to me, it stuck. And from that point forward, I've really materially changed the way I think about negative people online. And I'm so much fucking happier.
Oh, much happier. It's just incredible. But there's a reason, by the way, that Codie and Arthur and everybody else, why their brains naturally fixate on that. You have literally more brain tissue dedicated to threats than you do to opportunities. And that's how the Sanchez has made it out of the Pleistocene, is by being very, very attuned to threats, is to be more resentful and suspicious and fearful and angry than grateful and peaceful and loving. I mean, that threats are something you better pay attention to, or they're going to be really, really lethal. And so your brain is developed to actually look at that, to the blinking pixel of the hostile person. The person who's smiling sweetly at you from across the room, but the person who's frowning angrily at you, that gets your attention, because that could be a big problem once you get out on the street, right? And that's what's going on. And we have a tendency with technologically mediated relationships like social media to treat them as if they were in-person relationships, as actual threats. So the way to deal with that is perception and attention. So perception is understanding what's really going on, and attention is what you decide to pay attention to. And you have control over both your perception and your attention. Understanding what's actually going on in your brain and in the brain of the other person on the other side there gives you enormous power to be a happier person, and, by the way, to also be a more successful person.
Knowledge is essentially power.
Incredible power.
I had a couple friends that went through really tough things online. Like, they were kind of personalities. One was Sriram, who got into it in Twitter. He's Indian, born that way, and he said a couple comments about H-1B visas that were taken 6 ways from Sunday, and he was sort of in this storm and epicenter of hate on Twitter. And knowing him as I do personally, he's a lovely man who really cares about this country and wants good things for it. And we may agree or disagree with his beliefs, which is totally fine. But what was interesting was when I was talking to him, having been on the other end of when people hate you on the internet before, I said, I'm curious, did it feel like a physical threat?
Yeah.
Because I remember the first time it happened to me, not to his extent, but it felt visceral, like almost like when you get an adrenal spike and you can feel it, you get tingly. Is that true? Does our brain process things that happen to us online as if it is in person and threatening? For
sure. So what happens is that you see something, it stimulates your optic nerve, is processed for what you're reading online in the occipital lobe of your brain, sending a signal to your amygdala, which is the fear and anger part of the limbic system of the brain, stimulating a signal that goes through the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland in your brain, then sending a signal to your adrenal glands, which sit above your kidneys, which will start to spit out epinephrine, adrenaline, and this happens in 74 milliseconds. Then, if you're in that zone, 20 minutes later, you get cortisol coming in behind it, which is supposed to keep you in a hyper-vigilant state so that you can actually stay ahead of the cheetah that wants to come and eat you or whatever it happens to be. Now, in this case, it's stupid nonsense, aka Twitter. But your brain is still registering it as if it's actually a predator, meaning that you still got this adrenaline that set you up for hypervigilance, and then the cortisol, which is keeping you awake, and, by the way, also suppressing your immune system, because you don't want to be worrying about other little things when you need to be super vigilant about these particular predators. And that's when you can't sleep because you're not supposed to be able to sleep when you might get eaten. And you start treating it as if it were the kind of threat that it actually isn't. But that's how your system was created. This is a mismatch between our biological, our evolutionary environment and our technological environment. We were not built for Twitter. We were built for the savannah. And our body still acts as if it were. And so all of these threats, the only way you can combat this, number one, is by checking out, by saying, I'm not going to play, or is through understanding and self-management. That's the only way you can deal with this. Otherwise, you will be miserable if you're in public life.
It's so good. There were two other questions I was curious on with you. One is, I read a study that said, it was from the study, because I really should quote these when we're going to do it. Maybe you'll know it. Okay, I'll find it afterwards for you. It was done by Oracle. And the study said that 45% of people have not felt true happiness for more than 2 years, and 25% don't know or have forgotten what it means to feel truly happy. Do you think that's true?
Well, it's hard to know because I actually haven't seen, I've seen those data, but I haven't seen a time series. So I don't know longitudinally. I strongly suspect that if you went back years, people would be saying the same thing. That people, and part of the reason is just because retrospectively we think about our happiness in particular ways, that people think about how their life is. They think about what ideal happiness would be and then wish they could have it even though they actually can't. So a lot of this has to do with a misunderstanding of happiness as opposed to a true reflection of how happy we are. So reality about what happiness is and the experiences that we can have is really, really important, as it turns out. So when I talk to people about what it is, what their habits are, the mistakes that they've made, then they will retrospectively start to understand their own past in a different way. And by the way, you can edit your past, because when you understand your past in reality, it can turn out that like, oh yeah, no, I hate Thanksgiving. Why do you hate Thanksgiving? Well, you know, I had all these experiences when I was a kid. My mother was always crying in Thanksgiving. And well, let's go back and talk about what was really going on in Thanksgiving. And you edit your past, you remember things in a different way. The episodic memories are actually stored in the hippocampus of the brain, and you reassemble them de novo every time you think about it, and you reassemble them in a different way with new knowledge. You're editing your past in a more accurate way than you've done it. And then you can actually start to get different answers on those types of questions.
So that would be like you would go back to those Thanksgivings and say, you know, mom was really stressed because she was struggling with this, and she cried, but she always tried to hide it from us. And so like she was actually looking out for us on Thanksgiving.
And mom was awesome. And so you go back and you think not about Thanksgiving as a source of bitter memories, but one of sadness about what your mom was going through because you loved your mom. And that's an entirely different framing. And it's probably more accurate, as a matter of fact, because you're looking at your mom with some empathy, as opposed to looking back on how it was, you know, little Cody, it was mom. And, you know, it's really interesting because once you reframe it with respect to the suffering that other people are having, as opposed to the suffering that you remember, that's a really, really important edit that almost everybody can engage in. And again, that's been largely overlooked by the therapy industrial complex that wants you to relive your trauma. No. You need to reframe and understand your trauma, understanding that you probably weren't the person who was suffering the most. This can then stimulate the compassion that is at the core of your soul, making you a happier person and a better person today.
So when we're going back and looking at our trauma, are we often turning ourselves into a victim?
Yeah, happens all the time. Absolutely, because you're reliving it, and you're being encouraged to actually be resentful about it. And I mean, I get it. That's a normal thing to do, but that's not really a very healthy thing to do at all.
It's so interesting. We're going to make this about me. This is my therapy session with Arthur today.
You got it.
This is great. But it's funny because we had a therapist that we've been using for a while. And I felt like we were doing a decent amount of that. We were going back to a thing. And then we were being asked, how do we feel? How does that feel in our body? How did we feel about that? How did we feel at that time? And at some point I was just like, listen, we're kind of having the same issues. We're having these same situations. Nothing's changing. Why the fuck do we keep doing the same thing if it's not actually making any change? That seems unreasonable. But I'd never thought about it from that perspective.
Yeah.
Instead, could we go back and instead of saying like, this was so sad that this happened,
What other story could we tell ourselves
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah.
Because
And
you
what's
don't
more
get an
accurate.
and you
right?
don't get a medal for being the biggest victim, you
Right.
know?
Right. If you, generally speaking, when you think about a past that's difficult for you and you go back and review it, do it where you're not the star. Don't be the star of your trauma. Go back and look at the other people who are involved and actually think compassionately about the suffering of the other players in that drama. And in so doing, you'll get out of the psychodrama. The psychodrama is so deleterious because it's just so boring. And me. I'm telling you, it's so hard to get out of. I starred in all my dreams last night. It was so boring and tedious.
It is true.
And you can actually, you have the privilege of being able to go back and reconstruct the psychodrama in a way where you didn't have a starring role, where you had a role as somebody who was watching and somebody who now, with the wisdom of the years, is understanding it in a particularly different way. And it's just, it can really change your life a lot.
Oof. You've actually been around and friends with a bunch of famous people, celebrities, presidents, Oprah. Does fame make you happy or unhappy?
Fame is one of the four, according to Aristotle vis-a-vis St. Thomas Aquinas, there are four idols, and everybody falls prey to one of these idols. St. Thomas Aquinas was an incredible social scientist before his time. These idols, in other words, according to him, were substitutes for God, but have divine characteristics. And people use them even though they're idolatrous because religion is inconvenient, lots of rules, many one-sided conversations, so it seems. And so people will fall prey to their idol. And the four idols are money, power, pleasure, and fame. Those are the four idols. It's an almost exhaustive list. And fame can mean prestige. It can mean admiration. It can be very local. I want to be well known among these people, right? In academia, it's always wanting to be known as the expert in your field. They don't care. You don't want to be internet famous if you're in the sociology department at Harvard. But you want all the sociologists at the American Sociological Association to think you're big cheese. So money, power, pleasure, and fame. Fame is the only one of those you can only ever be happy in spite of. Now, this is important, right? Because you have a biological imperative to get more notoriety. You want more people in the caves around you to know who you are as opposed to you knowing who they are, because then you're going to be higher. That means you're higher in the hierarchy of a kin-based society. We are a tropical kin-based hierarchical species, Homo sapiens. We still are. We can get beyond the tropical part because we invented coats. But man, we're not going to get above the tribal part, the hierarchical part, the kin-based part. And so we want to rise in the hierarchy. There's a natural imperative to rise in the hierarchy. You want to do that. That's why you have two cars instead of one, and a flashier watch than you need, and all this stuff. You want to peacock in a particular way. You spend more time in the gym than you would need to otherwise because you want to rise in the hierarchy. Whether you admit it to yourself or not, that's what's going on. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, because then when you outstrip the number of people who could know who you are, because we live in the world of the internet, when millions of people are going to know who you are, you're going to be like, I love that. That feels so awesome, but I'm so empty and cry myself to sleep. What's that all about? And what's going on is that you're mismatched with your evolutionary tendencies and the technological reality that we live in. That's why Lady Gaga says that fame is prison, and that John Milton says that it leads us to live laborious days. It's because you want it, but it makes you miserable. Bottom line. And only very well-adjusted people can cope with it. Oprah Winfrey is one of them, by the way. She's one of the only people I've met in all of my work, and I deal with a lot of people who are very much in the public eye, who is exactly the same person in public as she is in private. Exactly. So when we're on tour and we're in front of thousands of people, or when it's just me and Oprah at her dinner table in Montecito, California, it's the same person.
Same.
Because she understands fame, she understands the purpose of fame, and she's not distorted by fame. But it's very unusual.
So do you think that you can't be happy and chase after the four idols?
So to chase after the four idols, it depends on what we mean by that. But if that's your goal, you won't be happy. If that's your final goal, all money, power, and pleasure and fame are intermediate goals so that you can do more important things. There's nothing wrong with money. I got nothing against money. But if money is your goal, you're going to be unhappy. If I'm going to make money because I want to do this, that, and the other thing, fine, now I'm listening, right? I want pleasure because I want to add it to people in memory and make it enjoyment, and that's part of happiness in my life. I want power, not per se, but because with power I can do these wonderful things. So for example, you wouldn't say power, but you say, I want the influence that actually comes from being a decision maker by being the mayor of Austin, or something like that. And you can say, okay, you want to be mayor of Austin. You want power. Why? Because I want to do this and this and this and this and this and help people in their lives. And fame is I want the people who can use this, and Oprah Winfrey is in this group, but others too, you know, George W. Bush, people that I know who are great human beings. It's like that admiration. Humans are mimetic. They mimic other people. And with the notoriety that I have, I can refract these people into a better life. If they see me and they admire me and they follow me, and I'm doing good things for my community, I'm living an upright life, I'm following the Lord, whatever your thing is, and they do that because of the admiration they have for you, dynamite.
Yeah.
Dynamite.
Interesting. You know, I guess it's a tool versus a trophy. Like, how do you see it?
Yeah. It's never more than an intermediate goal if you want to be a happy person.
That actually makes a lot of sense. And I think, you know, I've seen it. We were just talking about the book, right? And I hit the New York Times bestseller. And I remember one of my employees, Lindsay, who's like a lovely human. She would be, what are your archetypes again that you have at arthurbooks.com?
Oh, the archetypes of the affect profiles, the mad scientist, the cheerleader, the poet, and the judge.
She was a self-assigned cheerleader. And
high positive affect, low negative affect.
Right.
Which is to say high positive mood, low negative mood.
Right.
Intensity.
That's Lindsay. And anyway, so she asked when we hit the New York Times, she came down very excited. She was like, how do you feel? And I was like, zero different. I feel absolutely nothing inside one way or the other. The only thing that I thought was interesting is then maybe the mission gets out. And then I did have like a moment where I was like, that's fucking cool.
Awesome.
Like I get to say I'm a New York Times bestselling author. That's kind of,
because you're that forever.
That's cool. Yeah, I guess going back to the longevity of a thing.
So
there was a moment. So, you know, if I'm honest, even in the things we do, there's definitely part of it that is so short-term endorphin chasing, really fun.
Right.
But then I hope there's something a little bit bigger with it, which is kind of why when we talk about our company here, I have never really liked the idea of us just teaching people how to get money in finance.
Right.
Because, man, then, like, what kind of tool are we giving people to do what with?
Right.
That's like handing out AK-47s and not doing anything to protect maybe how people might use them one way or the other.
Correct.
But it's interesting to think that way. Okay, I want to close out with maybe one last question, which is, let's try it on for size for a second. Is there any way for money to buy you happiness?
Does money buy happiness? The eternal question. And everybody knows the conventional answer, which is no. And everybody knows the conventional response, which is let me find out. Right?
Exactly.
So first you have to ask yourself, why is it that everybody knows it won't, but they still want to try it and they can't stop themselves? And that has everything to do with the accumulation of resources. This is what gets us back to evolution. I want more money than I need because in showing that I have more resources than is necessary for me, I'm going to attract mates. And I'm more likely to survive the winter. I can store up more, buffalo jerky and animal skins and flints in my cave, and that's going to get me more mates, and I'm going to be able to survive the winter, and isn't that great? That's the reason you want excess resources. That's why you want 5 watches instead of 1. That's really, really what it comes down to. Now, we know, because we listen to grandma and we kind of know that 5th watch, it's sort of awesome, but then you're going to kind of forget about it and you're going to keep running and running and running and running. And that's a real source of frustration that people have. But there are ways to buy happiness. Now, to begin with, more money early on, and there's a bunch of studies on this that shows that when you have more money when you're poor, then your well-being does rise. And the reason is not because of happiness, it's because it lowers unhappiness. So early on, if you're, and we all, when we were almost all of us, everybody listening to us, when you're really young and you really lack resources. I mean, I went 6 years with no health care as a young man. And it was, you know, I didn't go to the dentist from 19 to 25. And then when I went to the dentist at 25, he filled 12 cavities and I felt a lot better.
Oh my God.
So you can say money bought happiness, but it didn't. Money lowered the source of unhappiness. And in my brain, I put 2 and 2 together and said, more money, feel better. And so you chase that the rest of your life. That's one of the reasons that you keep doing that, is habitual behavior on the basis of these patterns that we make. But there are ways, it turns out, that you can get higher well-being at any phase of life with money. It just don't do the one thing that you want to do. So there's 5 things you can do with money, okay? This is a very much a Codie Sanchez part of the conversation, isn't it? Number 1, you can buy stuff, right? We've already talked about that. Number 2, you can buy experiences. Number 3, you can buy time. Number 4, you can give it away. And number 5, you can save it. Those are the exhaustive possibilities of what you can do with money. 2 through 5 bring happiness. 1 doesn't. 1 is what you biologically have an imperative to do, is to go accumulate stuff, more of everything that shows that you're a successful person to yourself. However, if you buy experiences and experience these things with people that you love, you get happier, right? If you buy time and don't fritter it away, that you use it for your own edification or for the relationships in your life, you get happier. If you give your money to things that you're really passionate about, you get happier. And if you save your money, you get way happier. Saving money is one of the ways that you can buy happiness. Now, again, you can get to a certain point where you have, $10 billion and you're a miser, and that's not what I'm talking about. But conversely, by the way, spending money that you don't have on consumption, running up your credit card to buy, to pay for your vacation, that is one of the best ways to get unhappier, because you're not making progress. You're making regress, and all of human happiness comes from progress. Savings feels like progress. Debt is terrible for happiness, except for mortgages.
Interesting.
Because mortgages actually make a little bit more progress in owning your home than rent. But that doesn't count as debt.
Do you think that's why the Bible and so many religious books say that debt is bad?
Yeah, well, they say debt is bad because there were injunctions, religious injunctions against usury. And part of the reason for that is in biblical times, if you lent money at interest, the interest rate would be about 80%. And so it was extremely exploitative. It was only in the modern sort of Anglo-Saxon system of finance, only in the past 500 years have interest rates become non-usurious, have become non-exploitative. So the idea of the 5% interest rate was unthinkable in biblical times. And so that's more why they're talking about it. It really is to subjugate somebody else, is to lend money at interest in those times.
Interesting. So everything was like a high interest loan shark.
It was all the mafia, basically. And people who did that were people who were preying on people who were so desperate they would take an 80% loan. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's really, really what they're talking about. They weren't talking about, I think I'll actually buy the hut next door and rent it out. And I think it's a good rental property. Or, as you would talk about, it's like, I'm going to go get a laundromat,
That was not on the docket.
Vending machines. Yeah. So that's not what they were talking about in those circumstances.
Also, we need to talk about your 12 different cavities while you're drinking Diet Coke.
I know. Well, I mean,
is this your one vice?
Yeah, I'm a pretty ascetic character. I don't drink alcohol. I don't
So
run around. I don't stay out
You
late.
look pretty jacked. You look like you're getting fit.
I've been working out every day for 30 years.
The Harvard professor with biceps.
I'm trying to stay alive, Cody.
I like it.
Yeah.
That's good for the pursuit of academic excellence. The last thing I want to talk about, we're going to talk about this earlier in it too, when I give your little intro, because I think you are one of the most beautiful writers that I've ever read.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's
remember.
kind of you. I appreciate that a lot.
It's true. Speakers and writers. I remember when I first read one of your columns. This was at the New Yorker, right?
No, the Atlantic.
The Atlantic. I
Yeah.
always mess those two up.
Yeah.
And how you would take a subject that was really, really, I don't know, something I would never imagine talking about, such as, let's say, Hegel, right? And you would talk about it in a way that was so moving, but also easy to understand. Complex topics really simplified in a way that you want to get lost in a philosophy newsletter, which would be hard. Now you have a new newsletter
Right.
that's more accessible for everybody.
Right.
at arthurbrooks.com.
Yeah, exactly right.
Tell me about one of your favorite articles that you've written lately, and then everybody should go and sign up. I don't say that often, not like we need more emails, but
Right.
this one is beautiful, as is all your writing.
Thanks. I appreciate that an awful lot. It means a lot to me that you say that, because that's why I'm doing the writing, is because I want people to have a good experience when they're reading it, to learn a lot, but also to get some pleasure from it. Interest is one of the basic positive human emotions. People are always looking to learn something, but if learning is unpleasant because it's too impenetrable in language, for example, then it takes away the positive emotion. As a happiness guy, it's very important that people enjoy reading my words, or listening to my words for that matter. That's one of the reasons I take such care in thinking about it this way. Every week in my newsletter, it comes out at 9 o'clock Monday morning, I talk about something that somebody has written to me to ask. And, I get, like I get 12 or 15 emails a day from people who, they have real questions from different walks of life. So I'm talking about real issues based on problems that we can then turn into opportunities to get happier, to get better, to have more love in our lives, to be healthier and more fulfilled. And so last week, for example, I've been thinking about this an awful lot, is my own tendency to fall into suboptimal patterns of work. I love my work, which is great. But the truth is that and I don't even believe in work-life balance. Work-life balance is complete nonsense, because it suggests that work is not part of your life. There's a separation between your work and your life. Your work should be part of your life. That should be work-life integration. But when work takes over, because it becomes such an obsession, something you're thinking about day and night, it can become really unhealthy, because it starts to displace your love relationships. It becomes the relationship per se. So talking about work as a relationship is what I was talking about. And that's the essence of workaholism, a secondary addiction to the success addiction that many strivers feel. People who follow your work, they're all strivers. If you're not a striver, you're not going to read your books and not going to be following your podcast. But the result of that, it can turn into a pathology in which we objectify ourselves. And I talk a lot about the psychology, even the neuroscience of what goes into that. And then to start seeing how other parts of your life can be developed to make progress in those other parts of your life that will then cross-fertilize what you're actually trying to do with your work, so you can become a happier person and a more effective person. So the big techniques for doing that, it's just what I've written about. And it's an example of what that newsletter is all about in, between 300 and 500 words.
Yeah, beautiful. All right. Well, you guys should all go subscribe. Arthur Brooks on all the socials. I listen to you a lot on Instagram, and certainly your newsletter. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Cody. Congratulations on the bestseller. I know you don't care, but still it's kind of cool.
No, I care. I can't pretend I'm that cool. I just, sometimes you think you're going to get it, and then you'll feel something like
I know.
Lindsay, she had this camera in front of my face. She's like, "How do you feel?" And I'm like, "I feel nothing inside. I don't really, am I dead inside? What happened?" And that was a weird phenomenon for me.
I know. And part of the problem is that there's a ratchet to it. You're like, was it number one?
How do you know me so well?
Of course, because that's how humans are wired.
Jordan Peterson beat me out that week.
Jordan Peterson beat you. You were number 2?
Yeah.
No,
actually, we were number maybe 3 or 4, because number 3 was Snoop Dogg. So I got beat by Jordan Peterson, Snoop, and I was like, you know what? If we got to lose to a couple people, I'll take this too.
It's phenomenal that your first shot out of the cannon and you're getting in the top 5 of the New York Times bestseller list. I tell you, that's very unusual. But here's the best news: now you got room to grow in book 2.
Yeah, don't say that. Now I'm gonna get back on my not hot hedonic treadmill, but I'm gonna get back on the hedonic treadmill, and I'm gonna be motoring for book 2.
Yeah, I know. And then you'll just be ratcheted up completely in this state of.
And then I'll have to listen to your newsletter about how to chill the fuck out.
Exactly right. And then if it doesn't beat the next book, it'll be really disappointing, and it will teach you a very important life lesson. Oh, God. And then you'll say something like, "Yeah, but the right people read it."
Exactly. I will say that. I will have a lot of self-rationalization, which I'm excellent at.
I've been an author for many years. I have this library of rationalizations.
Listen, that's how we keep going and doing the unreasonable thing.
Exactly right. You got to get from one end of the day to another.
That's right. Okay, I want to do something we've never done before.
Okay.
We're going to give you a postcard.
Okay.
This is something new. And on the postcard, we want you to write a little message to young Arthur Brooks. What would you share with him today that you don't mind sharing on the internet, because we're going to have you read it afterwards, so don't tell us your social security number. But maybe something that you can take a few minutes to think about before we share with all our readers. We'll let you have a few minutes to write it, however long you need, and then you just open the door when you're done. Deal?
Deal.
All right.
Arthur, back
Yeah.
to you.
So I thought about, the patterns of my behavior over the course of my life. And I'm not young. I feel young. I feel your age, but I'm not. I'm 60 years old, so I've seen a whole lot. And I look at the good things that have happened, and I look at the pathologies, and I think back to what could I have told myself when I was, I don't know, early on in my career, for example. I started my career at 19 when I dropped out of college and became a professional classical musician. And I was a real striver. I mean, I was practicing from the time I was 9 years old. I was practicing many hours a day, and I wanted to be the #1 French horn player in the world all the way through my 20s. And then when that didn't work out, I left and I went to college in my late 20s and then graduate school. And then I wanted to be the #1 researcher in my field and to get tenure earlier than absolutely anybody else. And then when I left that, I became the president of a think tank in Washington, D.C. And I wanted to raise more money than anybody ever had and have the #1 think tank in the world. You see a pattern developing.
And you did
here.
both of those too.
And the one thing that I missed, that I wished I had known, so that I could have been a happier person, but a person that had more equilibrated relationships, and I could have made life a lot easier on my wife and the people who love me if I had known one thing, which is that my worth as a person is not related to my level of accomplishment in the world. Fundamentally, for whatever reason, and this is certainly not my parents' fault, but this is the pathology of the striver and a lot of people who are watching us, is this belief that I'm not lovable unless I'm admirable. Unless I'm doing something that people actually admire, then there's no reason to love me. And this has deep metaphysical roots. People who believe this often will believe that God can't love me unless I'm good enough, unless I'm virtuous enough, that my wife can't love me unless I'm an abundant enough provider, that I can't really have any friends unless it's on the basis of their admiration for me as a person because of what I'm actually doing in the world. And that's just not right. That wasn't right for me. It wasn't right then. It isn't right now. And I would have been a fundamentally happier person had I understood that. Would I have done the same things? No. But I think I could have been a better husband. I certainly would have been a more present father than the one who kept working that 14th hour instead of the first hour with my kids. And I think that today I would have a perspective on life that I could use that would be firsthand really helpful to others as well.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Arthur.
Thank you, Cody.